from Toronto to Tokyo, and from Thonia to Syrinx, this is The Basement, your companion to the Ready Player One novel. Join our hosts each episode for complete chapter breakdowns and deep dives into the pop culture references through a series of challenges and homework assignments. The Basement is the Ready Player One podcast for people who love things. And now, please welcome Albert and the rest of the Gunters for this week's episode. Hello, Gunters. You are in the basement. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 21 through 23, SHO NUFF. We are finally back for another episode of, we're going to break down 3 chapters this time. So I know we did this a few episodes ago, but we're going to try to tackle these next 3 chapters all together since the pop culture references were either light or stuff that we had already covered in the past. So help me to do that is somebody who's broadcasting live from an undisclosed location, so a secret location. And you want to tell everybody where you're at tonight? This is kind of a last minute unexpected thing, but very interesting.
Yeah, so Albert, we are 23 days from Dia de los Muertos, so I thought I would broadcast this week from Mexico. So bienvenidos a todo, and welcome to our broadcast from Mexico that was not planned, which means this setup is unstable at best. We're shooting for 2 hours, but there's a good possibility that this lasts for 4 minutes before the network completely fails.
Right.
But you know I'm here because I have the Sabor Original right here, because there's only Mexican Coke in Mexico, right. Just like all food is Mexican food in Mexico, even if you're at an Italian restaurant. That's
right. It's all Mexican. And
so hey, you'll have to forgive.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can tell, but Albert, I've got some very technical equipment I'm using here in lieu of my standard stuff. Okay. Holding my microphone, you may recognize my gym shorts, which are right here. Yeah. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And you brought a traveling green screen as well, I assume there, huh?
I did. And I will send you a photo of what this hotel room looks like after the broadcast. I'm sure I'm going to lose a security deposit. Yeah. I'm certain of that.
Yeah. Holes in the wall. There's all kinds of stuff.
That's right. But you know what? Room service does bring alcohol, but no Crown here in Mexico. It's very rare. So Cuba Libres tonight, because when in Rome, do what the Mexicans do.
Yeah. I don't even know what Cuba Libres. What is that? Something books? I have no idea what that is. I should
what
know.
In the world?
I should know, but I don't
Glen
know.
Morangi.
Glen Morangi. That's a deep cut from a few episodes ago. All right.
I will have you know that I had one of my friends from the UK correct me, and it's Glenmorangie.
Oh, yeah.
Glenmorangie.
I like Morangi.
Glenmorangie. Glenmorangie is how the French would say it. Glenmorangie is how the Brits would say it. And right. Really, they are the experts there. But we don't have time for this, sir. We've got 3 chapters to get to.
No, we do. We've got a lot to cover here. So let's get started. Let's jump into this, and we'll start with the narrative for chapter 21. So we'll do the narrative for 21. We'll get into the pop for 21. We'll come back out, do the narrative for 22, rinse, repeat for 23. So chapter 21. So this starts off with, so after learning that Artemis has now acquired the Jade Key, we learned a lot about artifacts. And artifacts are, I think he says there's over 100 artifacts in the Oasis. And that's nothing new to anybody that's played Dungeons and Dragons, fantasy role-playing games, even like some of the classic MMOs and some of the more recent MMOs, artifacts are out there. And so they're like these really high prestige items that are so rare and very powerful. But one in particular we do find out about is this thing called Findora's Tablet of Finding. And we know there's other ones that they mentioned, like the Catalyst, the 1981 quarter. In the movie, we got the Zemeckis Cube, which was kind of cool. But for the tablet, and we'll get into where that reference comes from when we get to the pop. But for now, it does a couple things. So anybody that has this tablet, we learn once per day, can reveal the location of any avatar. So if you're in a different sector than that person is, and you use it on that person or that avatar, then it'll tell you where the sector, it'll only tell you where the sector is. Should you be in the same sector with that person, it'll tell you the planet. And if you're on the same planet, then it'll tell you the exact location. So pretty powerful item. We know that Sorrento is the one that buys this when it goes up for auction. He talks about how it went up for auction and was purchased. Same thing with like the Catalyst. And it's at this point that we also learn. So Artemis at this point again is in first place. She's sitting at 129,000. Parzival's at 110,000. H is 108, 107, 106. And then 655321. That's Sorrento. He's sitting at sixth place right now at 105,000, and everybody else is kind of after that. And it's at that point he's really kind of like, you know what? I've let myself down. I really have not been focused at all on what I should be doing, and I need to get back in the game. And so now that he's no longer in first place, and this goes back to what we were saying a few chapters ago when I was talking about it feels like he does. I don't know if he purposely does this, but it seems like he does do better under pressure. He works better under pressure, and I think this has kind of been the last thing that he needed to really kind of get him back in the game, so to speak. So he's more determined than ever. He knows that Sector 7 is where he needs to go. He's been focusing on the trophies, which leads him to heading out to to go look for Halliday's trophies for all the Gamer Designer of the Year awards and all that stuff that he's won. And it's going to take him to a planet called Arcade here, and we'll talk about that as well. And then, so he and Max, this chapter really ends with he and Max jumping into Vonnegut. And, right before he leaves, he sees these crazed, he calls them crazed wannabes, disciples, and aspiring bounty hunters waiting for him. And I think this speaks to the level of popularity that he's at right now. There's people that love him, there's people that want to be him, and there's people that want to kill him because of where he is and how he sits on the scoreboard. So that's kind of what happens in this chapter. It's a pretty quick one, but Will, any thoughts before you get into the pop culture on it?
It's great. Let's move.
Okay, he wants to get this. We've got a lot to do. All right, let me get the screen up here, and we will. Do I have it up? No, I don't. Here we go. That guy right there. And let's talk about the first thing. So I typically talk about the Shroud of Avatar, and this is where the tablet of Fedora is finding. So if you're not familiar with Shroud of the Avatar, Forsaken Virtues, this is a game that officially came out in 2018 for the PC, although you can download it for Mac and Linux as well. It was created by Richard Lord British Garriott, as well as Dark Star Long. These guys were, the only person missing here is Lord Blackthorn, who was one of the ones that helped build Ultima Online. But these guys were all kind of behind that. And it is kind of like the spiritual successor of Ultima. I mean, even the fonts, you can tell that if you know Ultima Online, the fonts look very similar. There's a lot of the same spells, a lot of the same game mechanics and that sort of thing. So it's a big carryover from Ultima Online. Interesting, though, this game didn't come out. So 2018 is when, if you go look it up, that's when it says. It publicly was released in 2013, which, is 2 years after the novel came out, right? And this isn't the only reference from Shroud of the Avatar. There are other references as well. But my guess, and I have no confirmation of this, but my guess is Klein, Garrett, we know that they're friends. We know they talk. Maybe he was allowing him to play a very early version of this back in 2008 as he was writing, and he said, oh, this game's going to be huge, and wrote in some of these little Easter eggs to kind of help, maybe publicize the novel as well, but then speak to just how influential Lord British would possibly be at this point, knowing that these things are out there like that. So it's, I've only played this game. I downloaded it when it came out, or at least a couple years ago. It's probably been about 3 years ago. It's free to play now. I played for a little bit. It was really buggy, but that's because it was my laptop and not the game itself. I do know somebody who actually plays this game still. So we'll move on from here. But Will, have you heard of this game at all?
Yeah. What platform is that? Is that on the NES?
Yes, the NES is what I said.
It's not on the NES. I don't play that. Like, that looks like it's got some high-end graphics.
Yeah.
You know me. I don't typically play a lot of online games because if I'm in front of my computer, I feel like I'm working these days podcasting, one of the two. So
both
I don't
work.
typically, both of them. Well, I don't know. This isn't really work. I'm drinking. That's a win. Well, I'm not sure how you distinguish that from work.
Yeah, I was going to say, how is that any different? And I should mention on the right-hand side here, that is what the tablet looks like in-game. So that's the 3D rendered object in the game itself. So it does exist. And there are other references. I think there's another one that I deferred to another chapter that's mentioned in here, but we'll get to that when we get to it. So we'll move on, and let's talk about these guys. So I want to talk about Woz and Mitnick. And the reference here, dang it, I always forget to do the reference. I won't do the reference for the Pandoras because we already talked about it. But this one says, so I pulled up my Oasis Atlas and began to search for planets with the names I thought might somehow be related to the Quatrain. And I found a few worlds named after famous hackers like Woz, Mitnick, but none named after John Draper. So on the guy on the left-hand side, that's Woz. We always know, everybody knows who he is. He's kind of like this big teddy bear kind of character. And if you don't know who he is, he's one of the people that co-founded Apple in 1976. He's the creator of the Apple I and Apple II computers. I mean, Jobs had some influence as well, of course. He's got 4 patents that he came up with that are pretty cool. He's got these are the official terms: microcomputer with use with video display. So I guess that's basically connecting a computer to a display of some sort, which sounds like crazy to think about, because it's just we take it for granted. He's got a controller for magnetic disc recorder or the like. Number 3 is digitally controlled color signal generation for use with the display. And then probably the one that he's most famous or known for is apparatus for digitally controlling PAL color display, or the remote control as we know it. So the whole concept of having a remote control to change your TVs, he's got a patent for that as well. So he's known as a white hacker. So, he's done some shady stuff, but he did it in the name of science and in the name of education and just what if and how and furthering his education and that sort of thing. Never anything malicious that I was able to find. Now, the guy in the bottom right-hand corner, he's a totally different story. That's Kevin Mitnick. And quickly, he was born in 1963. Both of these guys are still alive today. He's a hacker. Now he's like a security consultant of some sort for, goes around. He's got a couple books out as well. But he first started hacking when he was age 16. He hacked into an ARC computer system that was owned by a company called Digital Equipment Corporation. And we'll talk about them a few times in this podcast. They did come up quite a bit. He went to prison in 1988, got out under supervision. Then he hacked into Pacific Bell. And then he got into all kinds of trouble. I mean, this guy was doing all sorts of stuff. And finally, he was arrested again in 1995. He served 5 years in prison in 1995. He was finally released in 2003, I think, after he kind of went back and forth to let him go up for a little bit and that sort of thing. There was a whole campaign for free Kevin stickers as well. But he's probably one of the more, if not the most infamous, at least for what I recall, for my generation growing up, he seems to be the one that you think of names, you think of hackers outside of like Draper. This guy is probably the most well-known. And I don't know, what have you, I guess, tell me your experience with both of these guys. And if you had to pick one hacker that is the most famous, would you agree that it's probably this guy, or do you have somebody else in mind?
No, Mitnick is definitely the most famous hacker. I would say he is even beyond Draper, because I really think Draper wasn't, in my opinion, completely malicious. And we talked about this a couple episodes ago. His intent was really, he looked at himself as a civil libertarian that was just protecting the privacy rights of people, to let the general population know that, these blue boxes existed and that there were vulnerabilities in these networks. And so, if you were stacking them, you're right. Woz, white hat, Mitnick, black hat. And I would probably put Draper in the gray hat area, because at the time there weren't really laws that were even driving network security kind of like we have today. So it wasn't like he was violating law. The laws were created because of the violations that he was, accused of. Well, I think that he admitted to doing at the time.
Yeah.
But I love Woz. I love his TED Talks. He is probably the most down to earth, multi-millionaire you'll ever meet. I mean, still talks about his stories of how they found Apple. Sounds like just a bunch of dudes in a garage hanging out. He's driving his Temple around. Steve Jobs getting robbed at gunpoint outside of a pizza parlor for a black box that he was making just to steal long distance phone calls.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, he's awesome.
Yeah. No, I like, he's a lovable guy. I mean, everybody loves him. He's still an official, I guess he's an honorary employee of Apple, even though he's been retired for a number of years now. They still have him on, I guess, in the payroll or in the HR system. On the left-hand side, that's a picture of Woz there with the blue box. So that's the infamous blue box that he was using to make long-distance phone calls. That would eventually, some of that would eventually make its way over into modems and some of the technology behind that. There's Kevin there, probably late 2000s, I think. And he's holding up that free Kevin sticker, which was everywhere. I remember seeing those in the early 2000s, people having those bumper stickers. That's Pacific Bell. That's the one that he broke into after he'd gotten out and got a bunch of personal data. And he eventually hacked a couple of different systems and was reading emails. I mean, just, notorious, infamous kind of stuff. And Digital is the name of the company there. So these guys are, world famous hackers, if you will. And I don't remember if there are any more that come up in the novel, but if they do, we'll obviously get to them. So I think that's all I had on those guys. Let's talk about Turbolifts. Now I'll give you the reference.
Nice.
Go ahead. I got up to, and this is obviously from Star Trek. I got up and walked over to my Stronghold's elevator, which I'd modeled after the Turbolift on the original Star Trek series. All right, so tell us about Turbolifts and Star Trek and the technology behind them.
So interestingly, both Star Trek and Star Wars use the term turbolifts, which is unusual. The technology between the two, sides of the house typically don't overlap like that. Yeah. But Star Trek turbolifts are a superior technology.
Oh, okay.
Because the
Shots
turbolifts.
Shots fired.
Hey, here we go. The turbolifts in Star Wars are basically elevators, right? So anytime that you see an external facing elevator, of course they can go faster or whatever, but at the end of the day, they're just a glorified elevator moving vertically along a single plane. What's interesting about turbolifts is turbolifts are more inclined to be not elevators, but Wonkavators, right? So if you remember Willy Wonka's reference, where he's like, hey, we go upways, downways, sideways, anyways, it's a Wonkavator.
Right.
And that's what turbolifts were designed to do. Right. And you can see this in a couple of episodes in The Next Generation, the most famous being the one with Geordi LaForge, where the anti-gravity fails within the Starship Enterprise. And Geordi needs to take a turbolift to the engineering deck and is getting thrown all about because it is a veritable Wonkavator.
Right.
So in the Star Trek universe, all of the locations are connected within a Galaxy class starship by a turbolift, meaning you can go from one point to any other. But what most people don't know that aren't like hardcore Star Trek fans, but that also means that if you have another ship that is docked within that Galaxy class vessel, or that Galaxy class vessel is docked to, say, a star base, then that turbolift could take you theoretically from the bridge of one starship to the other, or from the medical bay of a star base from the bridge directly by using a series of interconnected tunnels. And that next slide kind of shows you what that looks like. Ignore the purple stuff. That's actually a plasma array. But somebody
of course it is. I'm sorry. How silly of us.
How silly of you. The turbolifts are actually reflected in the gray dots that you see running vertically down the center shaft. Oh,
These right
I
here?
said it.
These right here?
Yes.
Okay.
Those are them. And then somebody's outlaid how you could get around the Enterprise using the series of interconnected turbolifts. I am not that big a fan, so I just kind of pulled that up there for your reference. And that, sir, is all you need to know about turbolifts. Really.
So I've got questions. No, I'm kidding.
No, you should have a question.
It seems pretty straightforward. I guess how far away are we from like this being like reality, right? It seems like a lot of the stuff from Star Trek is not a lot of it, but so there are some things that have come to fruition at this point. But were you anywhere close on this?
We're pretty close. Really? In fact, ThyssenKrupp, I'm not sure you're familiar with them, but if you've gotten an elevator, it's like one of three manufacturers, and ThyssenKrupp being one of the largest. They're the first company to actually release a we won't call it a Wonkavator because it can't go in every direction, but they released a product called the Multi in 2014 that's currently in testing. And it, instead of using cables like a traditional elevator would use, it is electromagnetic powered, similar to the way they power rides. Rides. Some train like high-speed trains and rides at amusement parks. So it was a finalist for the Innovation Award when it was released. It has reduced power consumption. You kind of see it. I think I gave you a photo of it so you can kind of see what the test model lays out at. But
did I not include it?
You did it. But if you go to Germany, you can actually see it at their test facility of ThyssenKrupp. But they have a number of people that are interested in using it. It's supposed to be more efficient. It's lighter. It's lower energy consumption by about 40%. It can carry more weight, but more importantly, it's safer. It doesn't look safer because it's pivoting at a 90-degree angle, still on a two-dimensional plane. So not quite a turbolift, but exactly where they need to be in terms of the right direction. They are basically one hinge away and a series of magnets from being able to move in all three dimensions.
Very cool. Yeah. I wonder if the Space Force is one of the primary people that's looking at this.
I'm sure they are.
They already got the logo.
They do. I'm too old to be in the Space Force. I looked into it.
Are you really?
Can't do it. No.
Space Force.
39.
That's oh yeah. Well, that was a long time ago for me. Hey, speaking of a long time ago, let's get to our next reference. We're going to talk about Xwings.
Never heard of them.
I was really restraining myself. Like, okay, it's like, so what should I talk about given the amount of data there is on Xwings and all of that? So bear with me here. So the reference is standing on the left side of the runway was my battle-worn X-Wing fighter, Parked on the right side was my DeLorean. Sitting on the runway itself was my most frequently used spacecraft, the Vonnegut. So DeLorean we've already covered, so we're not going to tell that. So this is the Xwing. So this is one of many starships in the world of Star Wars, and this is kind of I like this picture just because it gives you kind of all the different views of it. Now, so they were primarily used. I thought I'd just focus on the models that are kind of out there and talk about the origin. So what we're looking at here, this is a T-65. This is the original one that we saw in Episode 4 Star Wars when it came out. There are other variations thereof, though. So up here in the top left-hand corner, this is the Z-95 Headhunter. Pre-Clone Wars, this is what they were using. Eventually, they moved, and so you kind of got the same design here, right? You can kind of see, obviously, the similarities with the Z-95 Headhunter. The top right-hand corner, this is the ARC 170, and now this is the one that was used by the Clone Troopers in the Clone Wars. We saw it in the prequel trilogies as well. But this is where the wings started to open up, and we'll talk about S-foils and all that, right? We all heard the term, open X-foil or S-foils in attack positions, right? We'll get into that here too. The bottom left-hand corner, this was the T-70 model that came out. So this is the model that we see in The Rise of Skywalker and The Last Jedi. So Poe Dameron is somebody that'd be flying this one. And then the one that I don't think a lot of people know about, this is the most recent version of this. And this is the T-80 model. These are all built by a company called Incom. But this is the T-80. And this was in Star Wars Resistance. So we've only seen it in animation form. And Star Wars Resistance actually takes place around the same time as the sequel trilogy. The reason why we don't see the Resistance flying around these things is because they're really expensive. And at the time, the only people that could afford them was the New Republic Defense Fleet, right? So the whatever eventually took over. I don't want to get into the weeds, but they were the ones that could afford it. The Resistance didn't really have the funds to do it, so they stuck with the older model, which was the T-70s that you see right there. So let's talk about S-foils. And we've all seen this before. This is them opening up an S-foil. Now, the reason why is been debated for years. Like I remember growing up, there was a lot of argument. Why do they have to open? What's the point, right? Why can't they just stay open? The best explanation, I don't think this is a canned explanation. The best explanation I think that's out there is that when they're flying when they're not in space, there's something to be said about aerodynamics and all that. Okay, fine, whatever.
No, there's not.
Right.
Not in a vacuum.
Suspension of disbelief. In space, though. In space. Yeah. Yeah, when they're not in space, that's it. But when they're in space,
not in space.
The only thing that this thing does is they have these are all the X-Wings anyways all have a hyperdrive, which means they're capable of jumping to light speed, right? And the theory is that when you jump into light speed, the smaller you are, the less energy is consumed for you to travel. So when their wings are open, they're expanded. They have more volume around them. There's more space that they're taking up, and so they're consuming more energy when they go into hyperspace. And so their wings would close before they made the jump. I don't know if that's true or not. Like I said, this is all Star Wars science, which can be anything and everything you want it to be. It's all out of the head of Mr. George Lucas. So that's kind of there. Here's some famous X-Wings I thought we talk about. So there's Red 5. That's, Luke Skywalker's. Top right-hand corner, that's Black 1. That's my favorite one. And that's the one that blew up in The Rise of Skywalker. Or I'm sorry, Last Jedi blew up at the very beginning of the movie. And then the one on the bottom here, and these are both Poe Damerons. And this is his last one, which they didn't give a name to it. It's orange, gray, and you can see some blue back here. I do like the color. It's very UT, University of Texas. But yeah, these are probably the more famous ones. I would lump this one in for really hardcore Star Wars fans as being famous, only because this is the one from Star Wars Resistance. Even though we only see it in a few episodes, it was pretty neat, and they made a big deal about it when it was announced. So let's see. The other things about them that's interesting. So we talked about all of these they all have hyperdrives in them. They're all capable of interstellar space. When you get to the Empire side, some of theirs don't actually. And interesting enough, also, the Empire was supposed to originally buy these. Like, they're the ones that went to Intuicom and said, hey, we need a new class of starfighter. And they made all of this. They made the X-Wings, which are supposed to go to the Empire. Well, then there's some politics that played, and somebody decided to go with a different company instead. And so they had all these left over, and that's when the rebels went to them and said, hey, we'll take them off your hands if the Empire is not going to buy them. And so if you think about it from that perspective, this is what the Empire was supposed to use They went with the lighter, cheaper TIE fighter, which did not have hyperdrive capability, but they were more about a numbers game, right? They were going to swarm everybody with just sheer numbers rather than, better craft. So, yeah. I don't think I really have anything else on X-Wing. Do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I will say that while this is the coolest starfighter to me that exists, it is one of the most inefficient from, if you just look at it in terms of physics or its operation in space. I mean, in fact, I would say that of all the ships in Star Wars, probably the most efficient starfighter is the Gunstar from the last Starfighter, because it recognizes that there is a tactical advantage in order, in its ability to move, amongst the XYZ plane in real time. I mean, which we figured out in 1980. I'm not sure why the rebellion didn't know it, because our space shuttle did it, right? Like not even that, like the Apollo missions did it. So
to be fair, it was a long time ago. So it was before 1980. Yeah.
Oh, but I think they would have figured that out at some point. I mean, especially since it's not like the X-Wing isn't a vertical lift takeoff platform, right? At that point, they could have been like, well, you know what? I bet you in space, we could use that to some effect. I'm surprised they didn't. I'm surprised they didn't do that when they were hyperspacing ships into all kinds of things and destroying my life.
Yeah. All right, let's move on from X-Wings. Let's talk about Firefly. This is a love-hate relationship with me. So Firefly, and the reference here says the Vonnegut was a heavily modified Firefly class transport vessel modeled after the Serenity in the classic Firefly TV series. The ship had been named the Kaylee, which I first obtained when I first obtained it, but I immediately rechristened it after my favorite 20th century novelist, so Vonnegut. And we've talked about Vonnegut, I think, just 2 episodes ago. But this is Firefly, the TV series. It came out in 2002. There was only 1 season and only 14 episodes at that. There was this. It had Nathan Fillion, I think is his name, as Mal. He's basically the captain. You can kind of see him in the middle. I got a better picture here. There we go. So that's Mal right there. You got Gina Torres as the fighter. She's right here to his right, or his left on right of your screen. The absolutely freaking amazing Alan Tudyk, which is right here. And this is before Alan Tudyk had really come into his own. Like he'd already been doing a lot of stuff, and he's kind of that guy in the background. He's doing amazing work, but today he still is. Let's see. You have Marina Bakarin as Inara. So she was the prostitute with a heart. She's standing right here in the middle. Colonel John Casey of Chuck. I don't know if you remember him. That's him right here on the far, far, far left-hand side here. And that's obviously Jay Cobb. Jane Cobb is the character played by my favorite Baldwin. Oh, actually, no, he's probably my second favorite Baldwin, because he can't act. And he doesn't really try. And he just plays the same character every single freaking time in everything he's ever done. And it's just fine. Like, he does a great job of being mediocre. I'm okay with it. It had Jewel State as Kaylee, and she's right here.
I'm sure that's what he was going for, like a lifetime of mediocrity. Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah, I don't think he's following you.
Maybe not. There's Kaylee right here, who in the novel, like he said, that's who the ship was originally named after. Let's see. You had Sean Maurer as Tam. He's the surgeon. He's right here. He's the short. He looks really short, but the guy from Cosby is just really tall. That's him right there. He's the surgeon on the ship. Summer Glau is River Tam, so she's the brother of the doctor surgeon. She's on the far right hand side here. And this is the first thing I think I remember. I remember seeing Summer Glau in. I don't know if she'd been in anything before this. And then after this, she went on to do a couple of other things. Probably the most notable for me was the Terminator series, the TV series on Fox as well. Let's see. And then rounding up, we got Ron Glass, so formerly of The Cosby Show. He's right here. And he was known as Daryl Book. So he was the shepherd, the priest. And so you've got all these characters. The premise. So it is basically a space opera show. They had a bunch of guys running around the Firefly ship. They were kind of scavenging, trying to just live in this new world of America, USA, and China coming together. That was known as the Alliance. They were also trying to avoid something called the Reavers, and the Reavers were like these cannibalistic people that were flying in space, trying to always attack them. And they were always kind of looming over their head. I think when you get to the final episode, I think what it was is really, it's hard to say where he was going to go with this show, because it was just a lot of characters and a lot of threads that he was plotting. He was world building, and then never got to really pay off. And that's why we'll get to the movie here in a second. But I enjoyed the TV series. The problem I have with it is I really felt like there was a couple things that went wrong. They never landed a correct time. Like I remember watching this, and it was like, it was, I forget now. It was on a Friday night or whatever it was. I'd watch it, and then 2 weeks later, oh, we're moving to Tuesday night, and then, okay, I'm following to Tuesday. And then they move it to this night, and it just felt like Fox never knew where the heck this thing was going to go. The other problems that it had were, and this tends to be the case with a lot of TV shows that get canceled. It's just a matter of the cost production of the show and the viewership. And you can have a great show. We've seen this time and time again. But at the end of the day, these studios are all about making money. At the bottom, they've got investors. They've got to report to these investors. And if their cost productions are so high and the viewership's not there, I don't care how great it is, it's going to get canceled. That said, the petitions were so great and the fan base was so loyal that they ended up coming back and doing a movie a couple years later to kind of wrap things up. And again, we'll jump into this a little bit, but let me pause there. That's kind of the story. I mean, let me make one last statement about the Firefly's TV series. My sense is it was really about family. Like it felt like Joss Whedon was kind of building this family around, or building this family up, and I think I would have really liked that had it actually been given time to play out. Unfortunately, it never did. So let me pause there. Tell me, did you watch this show when it came out, and did you like it?
I did. I think that this is one of those shows that fell into the, or at least put me on the path of, being cautiously optimistic about any new show that comes out. Because Firefly, I thought had, but like you, potential to be great. Like this was going to be, it had been a while since we saw this format. I thought he did a really good job on character development throughout the episodes. Mm-hmm. And it felt like you said, it was going to take time to marinate this cast together. Almost like you saw the first early seasons of The Next Generation. It really didn't start gelling till probably the third season. And you just knew once this show got there that it would have a great story to tell because the characters would be well developed by then. But they, like you said, they never got the chance. And so now anytime that we have a show that is released in series, which is rare these days, it immediately turns me off. Like even if it's done on a show that's on demand, like for example, The Boys season 2 came out. I don't know if you watched The Boys, but I love it.
I've seen the first season. Yeah, it was great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. So the second season came out, and then they were like, oh, we're going to give you 3 episodes, and then you need to tune in every Friday for the release, kind of like what they did with Mandalorian, right? Just to keep people engaged. And I'm like, dude, nope, I'm not that guy, because I am a marathon runner. I need to make sure, that you finish the season out before I invest 8 to 10 to 12 hours of my life into it. And if it doesn't look like a show's going to get into it, like I won't even watch a show that's in its first season. I mean, with rare exception, even Game of Thrones, which I knew I would love, was 3 seasons in before I started watching it. And it's just, to me, I still refer to that as the Firefly effect. And there's a couple of other shows that did that before Firefly, but I remember that being the most influential for me.
So here's something that we've talked about, not on this show, but we've talked about. Well, no, we did. I think I talked with Crowley on this show before. It's come up in Discord. I know I've talked to the guys over at Film Appraisers about this a few times, but there's almost like this chicken and egg thing now. Like Seinfeld's a really good example, right? That show didn't do so well when it came out. The executives loved it. They gave it time to breathe and to grow, and it ended up becoming one of the more successful TV shows of all time. You don't really see that though these days. There's so many great shows that come out with these great concepts, great pilots. And yeah, they're a little rocky once they get to, third, fourth episode, but then, they have potential to pick back up, but that's when the viewership drops. And I know a lot of people they're kind of like that say, well, I don't want to jump into a show. I'm not going to invest in it because I don't have the time. But it feels like, so I guess what I'm saying is like, who wins then, right? Because they're not going to continue doing the series if people aren't watching it, but people don't want to watch it because they're worried they're not going to continue doing the series. Like there's just this weird conundrum that we're in with TV shows. And I think that's why the major networks cancel TV shows. I mean, they drop like flies every year. Once the fall comes out, we're two months in and you see it. I mean, the list just looks like, it's a death list of all these shows. And they're rehashing stuff and coming up with game shows and reality shows and everything to fill in the spot when they get to the spring because they have nothing left in production. But
yeah, I agree.
It's a weird conundrum. I don't know how to solve it.
For me, network television is dead. That is a dead format because you're right. At this point, it's pandering to the lowest common denominator of entertainment, which if that's your market, you're not going to be able to compete with streaming platforms, not like Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime, but with YouTube. You're not going to be able to compete with YouTube if you are trying to target people that are just ready to consume any piece of reality television you give them.
Yeah.
You know, so before Firefly, I would refer to it as the Jericho effect because it suffered the same fate.
Great show. Love that show. That's a good one. Yeah, and sucked that one got canceled too. Skeet Ulrich. So this is Jewel State, the lovely Jewel State as Kaylee Fry. And, she's out there doing stuff. She does a lot of TV now, a lot of TV shows, TV programs. She's in and out. Doesn't really have I shouldn't say that. I mean, if there's a fan out there, I'm sure they're yelling at me right now. But
well, you're clearly a fan. She got 3 photos here.
Oh, well, she's so gorgeous looking. And she's like the character herself is just like, she is, and Joss Whedon wrote her this way. She is the purest heart person, right? She's like the moral compass. You could argue the priestess as well, but she is kind of like the goody two shoes of this of the crew itself. So anything that she did was in the best intentions, purest of heart kind of thing. So she was just like the girl next door, lovable character, and I get why Klein decided to name the ship after her, just because of the popularity of the character.
So was she on your 10? Is this one of your? Did she make your list?
I don't know. I'd have to reevaluate. I don't think you're the one with the list. I don't have a list. I should.
That's
make one,
not true. Every man has a list.
Oh, okay.
Subconscious.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. I just need to get down to paper.
I think JR's right. She's the first female that we've had that we've done a segment on, and she wasn't the main character, and she got that many photos put onto a slide.
All right, I'll add her to the list.
I'm telling you, I don't even think you Googled those. You just grabbed them off your phone and just threw them up there.
These are my wallpapers on my phone. Here's the movie, which I thought it did really well. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's hard to say like why this movie didn't do very well. Critics thought it was good. The reviews weren't bad. I don't know if people didn't care at this point. It had already been 3 years, and they set this 6 years apart. And then I don't want to spoil anything, but 2 of the main characters died in the movie, which, probably good reasons. Alan Tudyk, I spoiled that one, but Alan Tudyk was already kind of starting to do other things, and I don't think he wanted to be locked into anything. Although, if you ask Joss Whedon, he was supposed to kill him. He said he always wanted that character to die at some point. But I don't know. Did you see the movie? What'd you think? Any better?
So no, I actually like the show more than the movie, only because I think that things like that, like Jericho, I wouldn't think would translate well into a movie, only because it's the middle that makes those types of shows great. And when you constrain yourself to a 2-hour format and you're trying to tell a story, and the middle outweighs the end, it's a problem. It's why long-running series that don't have a definitive end, like Lost, the ending will never stand up to the middle. It just won't. And if you had to truncate that into 2 hours, it's going to be difficult for you to manage. Like I don't care how great a writer or producer you are, you're going to run into issues, which is why I think like even on The Last Jedi, people are split because it's difficult to try to put that many bows onto a present, to the public.
Yeah. Yeah. But it is a series. I mean, this is like, man, it's got a huge following now. Like it probably, I don't know. There's probably no stats or numbers. This is all pure, conjecture on my part, but it feels like there are more people that like it today than I remember liking it when it was out. And, so it's kind of testament to the characters themselves, the writing. I did not like by the way, sorry, I don't want to poo-poo on the show because I do like the show, but I hated the music. Like they give credit to Joss Whedon as writing the music, the intro music, and I get it's a space Western and it's supposed to be a spaghetti Western sounding. It's terrible. Like I don't like the song. I don't like the lyrics. It's the worst thing about the show for me. But yeah. But again, I think it is. It's definitely more popular today than I think it probably ever was when it was out. So that says a lot about it. Look at the Baldwin guy there; he looks tough. Don't think you'd ever say that. All right, here's Whedonverse. So the reference here: I looted the Vonnegut from a cadre of Overraptor clansmen who had foolishly attempted to hijack my Xwing while I was cruising through a large group of worlds in Sector 11, known as Whedonverse. So this is Ernie Klein. Back in 2011, I guess when he wrote the book or just prior to it as he was writing, decided that he was going to, that at this point, Whedon would be so huge. And he had every right to think that. They had done some pretty good stuff. But so that's Joss Whedon over there, born in 1964. He's still alive today. He's labeled as a director, producer, a writer, a composer. I don't know why they list that. But I think for me, he will always be a comic book writer. And I'll talk about that here in just a few minutes. But most people don't know he was one of the co-writers. There were 2 people that wrote Toy Story. He was one of them. He went on to do Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Firefly, Angel. He wrote the first Avengers movie, wrote Avengers Age of Ultron. And there's plenty of more. I mean, there's other stuff this guy's done that I don't have on here. But I think the one thing for me that he's always going to be known for is writing this comic here, Astonishing X-Men. So I'm an avid collector even to this day. I do mostly digital than I do hard copies, which I never thought I'd be there, but I am there. I just don't have the space anymore for it. So I still collect comics today. But when he came into this title, it was such a fresh breath of air, honestly. And I know that sounds really cliche and stupid, but it truly is how I felt about it at the time. And I think one of the things that he's really good at, and I think you see that in all of his, anything he's ever written, the one thing that he does well that I don't think a lot of people do well is write dialogue. Like the conversation between two people to make it sound natural and still be funny and still be spunky and still be romantic and right, all that. I think that's really difficult. I don't think there are a lot of people that can do that really well. And he does it across all of the platforms. He can do it in comic books, which is a little different. He does it in movies. He does it in TV. And I think that's kind of where, I think if you look at all of his work, if you think about the dialogue and what the characters are saying, there's some pretty great moments in there. Maybe not quotable things, but just natural feeling things that make you lose or make you forget that you're watching a animated show or a space opera or reading a comic book. So you get lost in the dialogue itself. So I think that's one of the things he does really well. But what's your experience with Joss Whedon? Like him?
It was interesting. I actually thought you were going to take the Whedonverse in a different direction because there are a billion websites about the interconnectedness of the Whedonverse, right? That all of these coexist in the same universe ultimately. That Buffy and is a prequel to this and that, and the guys from Cracked, and I don't know if you subscribe to that channel, but Cracked After Hours, which is all that's really left of Crack magazine from the 80s. Sadly, it's really all that's left. But those guys are brilliant, and they one of their little web shows they do called After Hours, which is my favorite. They'll do like these 9-minute recaps of conspiracy theories or whatever, and they do one where they talk about the Whedonverse and the interconnectedness of all the different shows. It's lunacidal, but there is a very thin connectedness between those. So I could see how you have this galaxy that's just the Whedonverse with all these interconnections between the different planets, within the Whedonverse. Pretty interesting. Now, I don't know any of his comic book work. I stopped my comic book phase right around Image Comics. I would say was probably the end of it for me. And then, that's fair. Yeah. And so, I was in the military. I couldn't lug it from base to base with 700 boxes of comic books. Right. So left that all to you. But I still do enjoy occasionally picking up a comic book and just going through it. I even like it when I'm not completely in the middle of the, like I just grab one randomly and just flip through it. Yeah. And then just try to imagine what happens on both sides. And you're right. I think that was the era, probably the mid-90s, where we stopped seeing that dialogue, because I think there was pretty decent dialogue that was written before that. But it was really that shift where comic books became more like graphic novels and really took their tone from that to say, hey, these arcs that we're doing, they could be deeper and they could be more emotional. They don't just have to be about the action of the arc between the characters, but more humanistic. And I think that's why, and we talked about this before, why I like Tony Stark, because he's a regular guy, except he's, as smart as I am.
Yeah, right. No, there's, I think, I would recommend this, honestly, if you're into comics. And he's not the writer currently on X-Men. They actually replace him with other famous writers now. But and his run's over with that. He's doing some DC stuff now. But if you get a chance and you want to read up on X-Men, this is a great series to pick up. And it reintroduces Kitty Pryde and Colossus and their relationship, which I thought was really cool, because at this point it had been buried for a number of years. No one had really touched it. So he brought it back, which was great. All right, well, enough about Joss Whedon. Let's talk about this. So we're going to talk about light speed. Let's see the quote. As the Vonnegut made the jump to light speed, each of the planets on my view screen became a long streak of light. Let the light speed engage, Captain Max reported. So light speed. So this is literally traveling at the speed of light or near the speed of light. Let's see. I looked it up. 670,616,629 miles per hour is the speed of light, which I can't even wrap my head around as far as how fast that goes. I guess the question that we have, and the question that I was going to get into on the show, is whether or not this is possible.
It is not possible, sir. Are we going to get to talk about physics again?
We're going to talk about physics.
Oh, let's go.
Yeah. So is it possible? So I think the way I read this, oh, and by the way, this has nothing to do with it. I just thought it was a cool graphic.
What in there?
What? I was like, I need a graphic up here to make people think we're going to talk. No, we're not. I have no idea what this is, honestly. Maybe it is. I don't know. But I don't know nothing about what this is on the screen right now. But light speed, the way I read it was Einstein was right that matter cannot travel faster than light. But some things don't have matter, like photons, and so they may be capable of traveling faster than light. I read that there was a couple things that do. Photons being one. The end of the galaxy is another. I guess the far reaches of the galaxy are traveling faster than light. I'm not going to even try to explain that one. There was another one too, and I forget. Oh, it was the quantum physics box, and that one just blew my mind. Like, whole quantum physics thing is just like whatever. Dude, you're making stuff up. It's like, a 5-year-old coming up with theories and ideas. As far as I'm concerned, it might as well be, anyways. But all that said, I think what by and large everybody said that it's truly you cannot travel faster than light. Matter cannot travel faster than light. So I don't know what's your theory.
Oh, I don't have a theory, but if you would have let me talk about Schrodinger's cat like 3 episodes ago, this would make perfect sense to you, because that's really what it comes down to when you're talking about quantum mechanics and astrophysics. But you're right. So a photon, which is, basically the representation of light and energy, has no mass, right? And as things accelerate, they increase in mass, which is why you can have light that travels at light speed. But any object that is greater in mass will only increase in mass as it accelerates. So can't happen. Right. But that's where quantum physics comes in. This is exactly what we were talking about the other day, is that when you're talking about the speed at which light is transmitted, it really has to do with the perception of the person who's observing it. So at that point, if you have, and it's why quantum computing works, because you're talking about a 1 and a 2 occupying the same binary space in terms of the existence or absence of protons and electrons in a single space. So Schrodinger's cat says, and you're familiar with this, right?
I've seen
you got 2 cats. Yep. Yeah, you got 2 cats, and you're not sure if the cat. It's probably easier way to say it. I think, and this is even older. A wise man's holding a bird in his hand, right? And he asks you, "Is this bird alive or it's dead?" And if you say alive, he kills it, and if you say he's dead, he lets it free. So the answer is it's whatever you determine it's going to be. So that deterministic approach to physics follows the micro rules of physics and not the macro universe of like gravity and the things that we can see. Observable 5 principles of just the scientific method do not apply to the micro reality. Come on, man, of like quantum computing and of course faster light travel. Sorry.
This guy know how to party or what? Yeah, okay. No, I believe you. I do. This is the light. I've got 2 images up here. I've got the Star Trek Enterprise, and I've got Chewie and Han sitting in the Millennium Falcon. And I was looking it up. I want to see, like, okay, so what's the difference between light speed versus warp drive or hyperspace, or warp drives, I should say. Hyperdrives versus warp drives. So I looked this up. The Enterprise travels 9,000 times faster than the speed of light using a warp drive. And a warp drive, the best I understand this, is theoretically it warps the space around the ship, which creates this kind of a wave that pushes it. So you're not traveling faster than light. The space itself is moving, right? So okay, sure, I'll buy that. The Millennium Falcon, though, travels 9 million times faster than the speed of light using a hyperdrive. And the way the science works here in Star Wars is they don't travel through space as we know it. They actually go into hyperspace, which is think about it as another dimension, right? They go into a hole, which is kind of where you see them disappear, and you see them you can see it here in the little graphic here, the light's going by. They actually go into hyperspace. Now in hyperspace, the rules are totally different, and you can travel extremely fast, and then, you don't have all the ill effects of all that. But traveling through space ain't like dusting crops, boy. Right? So you got to have a hyperdrive. And, but beyond that, I don't know. That's as far as I got. And then they started getting into like the actual science of it all. And I'm like, I checked out. I'm like, done. I'm going to go look at SHO NUFF at this point. So
yeah, like we talked about, you don't need all of these fancy gadgets You just need an Einstein-Rosen bridge, right? You need a wormhole. That's real science and follows all of Einstein's theories of relativity as a possible solution. Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, we're not getting any more of that. Let's talk about what are we at? Chapter 22 now?
Oh, wow. Give me a recap. Where are we at there, cowboy?
Chapter 22. So that brings us to the end of chapter 21 and with the pop culture. 22. So this starts off. So Parzival arrives on the planet Arcade, which from space looks like the Death Star from Star Wars Arcade. I love that Ernie Klein put that in there because you can see it, right? You can visually mentally see that. And I think it's really cool. And the surface looks like Battle Zone, but we'll break those down here in just a little bit as well. And it's this planet that's basically a museum. And the further you go down to the core of this world, you have all these really old, the very first arcade games that were ever created. And as you reach the surface, as you go up in each of these layers, as you get to the surface, the games become more modern. So you have like the, you have like the 60s, and then you have the 70s games and 80s and 90s, et cetera, all the way up, which is a really cool concept. I think if anything was ever built like that in the virtual world or real world, it'd be really cool. I remember there's
a place in Springfield, Missouri we go to called 1984, which is the same thing. Each level of this arcade bar for adults is a different era. So you can go and they have like lounges and game rooms that are themed around that area. So the entire floor is like 70s era with shag carpeting and the whole deal. Then you go up to 80s and they're showing movies on like console TVs. It's freaking amazing. I mean, Galloping Ghost kind of does it by section, but that place does it far more successfully. I remember that place.
I was going to ask you about it because I remember after you went there or while you were there, I don't remember, you either called me or texted me to tell me how amazing this place was because you had never seen anything like it. But yeah, I would love for them to build something like that around here. I think it'd be great to be able to go back and see a lot of these old games.
I've got some money sticking around. Let's do this.
And I wonder if, like, honestly, like I was thinking about this too, at one point, and I was reading the book, whether or not these games will be lost and gone forever. Like just the death of arcades. We'll talk about that here too when we get to Aladdin's Castle. But I mean, it's just it's sad. I mean, I don't know. Maybe some people don't care. They're like, well, yeah, they suck. There's a reason why they're not around. But it is a part of, if you grew up in the 70s, grew up in the 80s, even the 90s, this is a huge part of your life and your childhood. And it's really hard to find an arcade. And if you do find an arcade these days, they're not filled with video games. I mean, that's mostly coin operated stuff or prize things, ticket machines, right? And you go back and you're like, where's the arcade? We have one here in Austin. It's huge, enormous. And they've got everything that you would want. They've got pinball machines. It's called pinballs, but they've got like pinball machines. They've got go-kart racing in there. They've got a virtual reality thing. It's got all sorts of stuff. But if you look for the arcade, they've got it all the way in the back in the corner of this mega complex of a building. It is next to the bar, behind the pizza shop, and the classic arcade games is such a small space, all relatively speaking, to the rest of the building. And, it's got some of the classics in there that you would expect, but it's nothing like it used to be, all right, and what arcades used to be. But anyway, so this is, we're talking about arcade and just the concept here of how cool that was. So he gets there, he realizes that the trophies that he's seeking don't move. He finally finds these trophies that Halliday had when he gets down to the museum area. And, they don't move. So he figures, okay, this is kind of a dead end. I'm going to give up. And so he's making his way back up to the surface, and he takes a route that he normally doesn't take and finds himself coming up onto Happy Time Pizza. And Happy Time Pizza, he says, is this pizza joint that used to be in Halliday's hometown. And there's something weird about this, right? Something doesn't seem right. He's never seen this before. He's probably been here a million times for research or just for leisure or whatever, but this is different. This time's different. He decides to go in, and while he's in there, he notices that there's a Pac-Man machine that's unplugged. There's a sign on there talking about, whoever gets the highest score or whatever. He plugs the machine back in, notices that the high score is there, which should have not been there. It should have been set to 0 because it became unplugged. All this starts to tingle his spidey sense, and he starts to suspect that maybe there's an Easter egg here that he had never seen, never was aware of. So he ends up playing like this perfect game of Pac-Man, and this is where he gets the coin that's now infamous, right? And it's the same coin that we see in the movie. Same thing, kind of a one life type thing. Ernie Klein used to hand these out at the book signings. We went and saw him at here in Austin one time for not Ready Player One, a movie unrelated to Ready Player One, but he was there and he was going to be there. When we got up there, he was handing out these coins to all the kids right out of his pocket, which was really neat. So he still hands them out. Those coins, by the way, if you find one of the original ones, they sell for quite a penny on eBay. The only problem is it's hard to find the ones that are not counterfeit. People have counterfeited these things, and now they sell them for $20, and there's no way to distinguish whether it's legit or not. There's nothing, no markings or anything like that. So, all right, I digress. But so anyways, he plays the game. He gets a 1981 quarter, which we know will play a huge role for him a little bit later as an artifact. And let's see, right before that, I guess while he's playing, he hears that H has now acquired the Jade Key, and he's really ticked off that he's kind of hit this dead end. He got this coin, but it's not really important at this point because now H is in second place. And to make matters worse, Daito's name disappears off of the scoreboard altogether. Now, the only saving grace here is I think what's his name? H reaches out to him and says, "You and I are officially even now. Got that? I consider my debt to you hereby paid in full. Better hurry. The Sixers must already be on their way there. Good luck." And H sends him a picture of the cover of Zork. So that's kind of his clue, and it tips him off, and he realizes, okay, my next stop is going to be the planet of Frobos, and I need to go venture into the Zork world. So, and that brings us to the end of chapter 22. All right. So many thoughts, anything that caught your eye, caught your ear?
Yeah. So this chapter, I think more than any other, and probably like you, I've seen most of Ernest Cline's interviews, like his long play interviews that have been like an hour, 2 hours. And he talks about this chapter extensively, probably more so than any other chapter in the book, because he goes into quite a bit of detail about the games that are included within this and why he loves them. Right. And, he was always fascinated with Pac-Man, even though, he, like most kids and us included, played video games for which we were able to. He wasn't a rich kid either. It's not like he was just slapping quarters in video games. So he was more fascinated with watching people play and the amount of skill it took. And Pac-Man was a game that always fascinated him, which is why it has such a predominant role in this chapter. Yeah. In fact, I believe that he said at one point that he used an emulator to skip to the last level of Pac-Man to see what it would look like when it failed if you're playing the perfect game. But it was an emulator. He was more of a Battlezone guy, so he played a lot more of that than he did of Pac-Man.
Oh, nice.
Just knew where his strengths were.
Yep. All right, well, let's get into the pop on this one, and we're going to start with me. No, we're not. Sorry, that was wrong. But here we go. We're going to start with Def Leppard. Let's see. The reference was, as I approached the nearest tunnel entrance, I heard loud music emanating from below. I recognized the song as Pour Some Sugar on Me by Def Leppard off their Hysteria album, Epic Records, 1987. And from what I hear, this is really popular in strip clubs. But, Will, tell us a little bit about Pour Some Sugar on Me and maybe some Def Leppard.
Well, if any of your formative years were in the 1980s, then you definitely know this track. It's track 5 on the 1987 12 times platinum album Hysteria, which took 3 years to develop. So if you are a fan of Def Leppard, you know it was an incredibly trying time for them. Their first record was a huge hit, and they were trying to rush to get the next album out, but there was a series of unfortunate events. They had to change production companies. The drummer lost his arm. Ultimately, this cost $5 million to produce this album. And at that point, there wasn't a lot of faith that it was going to be successful. Just one aspect of this is the artwork, which we're showing here, was done by Andy Airfix. And so he had worked with a number of different people, Led Zeppelin, Metallica, Judas Priest. But he had recently done the Thompson Twins album, and the album for for Hysteria was originally going to be Animal Instinct. So he had developed this entire artwork around this album, and then ended up having to change it. And I would say at the last minute, but he basically had 2 years from that point to come up with the artwork that you see there. Oh. Right? It's crazy. So Pour Some Sugar on Me, which I think everybody has heard this song somewhere, wasn't even supposed to be on the album. It was the last song produced. And so they were just messing around in the studio, and the producer was like, "Man, that's the best guitar riff I've ever heard." And they were like, "Guys," they were like, "we got to get this on the album." They're like, "Look, we already have 12 tracks. We don't need to put this on there. We've been working on this for, better part of 5 years or 3 years. Yeah. And, I don't want to spend another 6 months in the studio, because that's how long it was taking them to get through a song. But this song only took them 10 years to make. Right. And so
10 days or 10 years?
10 days. I'm sorry. It only took them 10 days to come up with this entire song. Okay. Yeah. But as popular as this song is, right, at the time it wasn't. It almost took it took almost a year for this to start getting serious radio play. And in the US, it actually moved faster than it did in the UK. It only got to like 18 in the UK the year before. But apparently a lot of strippers drove this song. Yeah, dude, I heard the same thing, right? That they were the ones that were requesting this song. It was popular at strip clubs, and MTV, when they released the video, got it moved all the way to number 2, right? And so when you think about it, this song seems like it would have been a number 1 hit when it came out. But the reality is it could not overcome Richard Marx's Hold On to the Night.
I see it down there. That's why Richard Marx is there.
That's why he's there, because he has bested Def Leppard. And, people aren't, that's not strip club music.
Nope.
That's what you play for your wife when you get back from the strip club.
That's right. After you're in
I don't know. Hypothetically. Yeah, I don't believe in such things.
Right. You wouldn't know.
Moving on, sir.
Yeah.
So
what's this about?
So you might remember, do you remember this? So when this first came out, Pour Some Sugar on Me, it was competing for the MTV Music Award for Best Heavy Metal Video against Aerosmith, Ragdoll, Metallica won, Def Leppard, and Guns N' Roses' Sweet Child of Mine. And so it seemed at that time in history that you were either thinking the best song of this year is Sweet Child of Mine, or you thought it was frickin' Pour Some Sugar on Me.
Right, because I can tell you, I can attest to this as a hardcore MTV watcher, and it's not like as we all were, those 2 videos were on freaking every hour, every 30 minutes. They were playing one of those 2 videos over and over again. It didn't stop. And I mean, I love the song. I was a kid. I could listen to it all day long. But you're right. I mean, those were like, there was probably nobody else out there as far as, I was concerned in terms of who was a rock band and who could even be nominated, much less win the award.
Yeah. Insane. So, but it didn't win a Grammy. This album did not get 1 Grammy nomination. No single off this album got a Grammy nomination. In fact, that year at the Grammys, best rock performance by a group or duo went to the Traveling Wilburys. Get out of here. Yeah. But more importantly, those 2 songs, as great as they were, spawned what I think are 2 of the worst covers in the history of music. One being Tom Cruise's cover of Pour Some Sugar on Me from Rock of Ages, and Sheryl Crow's Sweet Child of Mine. I've
never heard.
Have you heard these? Because I was going to make you pick which one of these is the bigger abomination.
I've heard the Tom Cruise version. I've never heard Sheryl Crow's Sweet Child of Mine, and I don't think I ever really want to. So
it's exactly like as you play, like as soon as you loaded Sheryl Crow into your brain, and then you loaded Sweet Child of Mine, that sound is what that sounds like. Okay. You don't need to listen to it. You've heard it.
I'm done.
Like I can hear Sheryl Crow singing anything. Like Metallica 1, Sheryl Crow, got it. I know what that sounds like. Great song.
Yeah, I don't. Was that the only thing we had on it? Yeah, Sheryl Crow. I'm not a big Sheryl Crow fan either, to be honest. And that's, I mean, I know she's talented and people love her, but I don't know. I never got into her very much.
Yeah. Well, she has a special place. There's the era of music for me I've referred to as Abilene music because it's the era where I met my wife. So it's like Sheryl Crow, Counting Crows, all the crows, Black Crows. They all fell into that little window. So
a lot of crows in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s. So where does like Rick Astley was around this time? Where does he fit in with all this?
So Rick Astley, this at the AMAs, Pour Some Sugar on Me did clean house and one favorite pop song of the year with a close second place to Rick Astley. Right. So no one is Rickrolling people with Pour Some Sugar on Me though, even though that won the AMA. It's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. We got that.
We should start that trend. I'm just going to randomly on all of our videos, sneak in a little
cut over.
Yep. But I'm going to do the Rock of Ages version it's unwatchable.
Yeah.
Scientology.
I love that Def Leppard album, by the way. Just it's so great. I love Woman, Hysteria, Pour Some Sugar on Me. I love the look. I mean, I was wearing the cut up jeans and think about the t-shirts with the big things cut out on the sides as well. I mean, they were very influential for a lot of reasons. And I mean, even like Rocket and all that. I don't know if Rocket was on that one. I think he came off the next
It
album.
was.
Was it on this one
Yeah.
as well? Yeah.
Mm.
But I mean, it's just a great album, all together. And it was. I didn't know who Def Leppard. Well, no, that's not. I take that back. I actually did know who Def Leppard was before they released this album because I like Pyromania. I really
Exactly.
like Pyromania. So I was pretty excited that this album was coming out, and it just felt like it never came out because of. And I didn't at the time. I was younger. I was younger at the time, obviously, but I didn't know anything that was going on. I just knew that I hadn't heard from them in a long time. So,
Right.
and then to see the drummer with an arm, that was kind of shocking. All right, let's talk about Aladdin's Castle. So, and we're going to talk about Aladdin's Castle and Battlezone together. There are some other references in here like Donkey Kong, Robotron, Galaga, Dig Dug, Star Wars Arcade. We've talked about all those already in previous episodes. So, in the interest of time, we're going to cut those out. So the references, I'd entered the museum next to an old arcade called Aladdin's Castle close to the surface. Here on the surface, arcade looked exactly like the environment of the 1981 game Battlezone, another vector-based classic from Atari. So first, this is Aladdin's Castle. Aladdin's Castle started in 1959 in Harvey, Illinois. It peaked at about 450 locations by the 1980s. And so if you were around early 1980s and there was this mall, chances are there was an Aladdin's Castle in there. Or if there wasn't, there was some arcade that would eventually become an Aladdin's Castle because they were picking up and buying these little mom and pop video arcade games video arcades that were sitting around in strip malls and malls at the time. The sales, like a lot of the industry itself, like really the arcade industry itself, started to decline around 1990. It was finally sold off to Namco in 1993, and I think I've got a picture of a token with the Namco logo on there. But then after that, they just following the trend of, there were two things that kind of worked against them, right? You had arcade games really starting to lose popularity because home consoles were producing better games and didn't cost any more, and you could be at home and all the conveniences of that. On top of that, you had the declining of the mall. They were embedded in the malls, and so they were kind of bound to that. They weren't their standalone brick or mortar places out there. So as the malls went, so did Aladdin's Castles, and so did a lot of the arcades as well. So they kind of just followed that trend. Now, on the left-hand side here, this is what a Aladdin's Castle looked like. Now, the one we grew up in did look like this on the front. I don't remember some of the stuff on the inside, like the little train and stuff like that. I know these are probably some of the bigger ones. But by and large, this is pretty much what it looked like. Very similar. It was darker, though, as far as I recall. I think they obviously lit this up so they could take the pictures. But you'd walk into this, and it felt like it was a castle, right? They had all the stuff on the walls, right? You can kind of see it there. They had the gates and, the iron fencing and all that. The front down here in the bottom left-hand corner, ours and the Ingram Mall looked like that. It didn't have this paneling on the side, but it definitely had that logo. It definitely was dark. They had that dark wood around the outside of it. In the top right-hand corner, I've got a picture of the original coins that they used to hand out. And I've got some other pictures as well on some of that. This is a shirt. I put the shirt in here because I actually have a picture I'll show you in just a little bit where Ernie Klein is wearing Aladdin's Castle. When we saw him 4 years ago here in Austin, he was wearing this shirt. Now this is the last known Aladdin's Castle in the United States. It sits in Quincy, Illinois. It's located in the Quincy Mall, and at least as of last year, 2019, this is still around. I went and looked it up. It doesn't look like it's closed, so it looks like that mall's still open. It still looks like this Aladdin's Castle is still around. You can look at the front. I mean, even the front of it, right? This looks kind of 90s to me now. It doesn't look like the original 80s, more maybe late 80s, early 90s kind of look going on here. That's a picture of the inside. I mean, nothing like the Aladdin's Castles we grew up in. There's hardly any games in there. It's all driving games and shooting games and, again, coin-operated crank games, stuff like that. Here's another shot of it from the front of it. Here's one of the games that's in there. They've got the Ms. Pac-Man Galaga combo thing. But there was a gentleman, and I didn't get his name, and I do apologize. There's a gentleman on Twitter that heard about that there was Aladdin's Castle and did this pilgrimage to drive up, and he's nowhere near Illinois. He went out there, took his son out there because he wanted to show his son, hey, this is what arcades used to be like, because there wasn't an arcade where he lived. And when he got out there, he's got some other pictures that he took with his children and stuff. But it is kind of sad that these things are gone, and even for us here today, there aren't any Aladdin's Castles around that I'm aware of. There's none here that I'm aware of, at least in Texas. Again, like I said, this is the last one, so that would make sense. But even like arcades in general, there aren't any arcades out there. I'm trying to think even outside of like pinballs, the one area, the one that I mentioned here in Austin, there aren't a whole lot of them. So let me show you another picture here. So in the top left-hand corner are the 3 different kinds of coins. Here's a certificate for free birthday shirt. This is the stuff they would hand out for people that want to have birthday parties, or they've got little punch cards. So, and I meant to look that up. I don't remember the punch cards and what that meant. Excuse me, but here was tokens. You see them handing these things out. And then the cool thing was you could put your money into the coins, the little token machine or whatever, and it would give you tokens that way. But if you had like a $5 bill or you had like a $10 bill, you could go in and pay them, and they would give you this little sack of coins that have, just like it shows right there, and that would have all your coins in them. So as a kid, this was really cool to have this little sack of coins that had Aladdin's Castle logo on there. You're walking around with it. You were kind of like the real cool kid because you had this. It was really neat stuff. So it was something that you could bring home with you and kind of show off and, show off to your friends that, hey, I went to Aladdin's Castle kind of thing. So now this is kind of a deep cut. I was very fortunate. I honestly didn't go looking for this. It was only through the process of looking for pictures that I ran across this. But when I saw it, I went, holy crap. I remember the Aladdin's Castle guys, the guys, girls, whoever was running or working there had these vests on. And I used to, not anymore, but I used to think these were the coolest things ever, that they had these denim looking vests with the logo on the back that said Aladdin's Castle. And I thought, man, someday that's going to be me, buddy. I'm going to be wearing that vest. And you can see it's got these deep pockets right here. And so they would walk around, and these guys always thought they were cooler than everybody else because they worked at Aladdin's Castle, right? But you'd see them and they'd kind of be strutting around, and you'd say, hey, I need to buy some tokens, or yeah, man, I'll hook you up. And they'll pull out, and they would carry those pouches that I showed you. They would carry those pouches in these oversized pockets here with coins. So they would actually have them in their pockets like that, and they would pull them out. And when they'd run out, then they'd have to go to the back of the office, and you'd have to wait, and they'd come out with a little pouch and that sort of thing. But man, I really thought these coins, or these vests anyways, were the coolest thing ever, and I really wanted one. And then finally, here's the picture of, that's me. Again, I apologize. It's kind of embarrassing. Like huge, like this is like 25, 30 pounds heavier than I was. But that's me and Ernie Klein. This was back in 2016. I think we had just gotten some books signed. You can see those in my hand there. And that's Ernie. And if you can see it, he's got the Aladdin's Castle. And I remember when we were sitting there talking and he was signing stuff, I had asked him about the shirt. And he had actually mentioned that he had been to an Aladdin's Castle. I don't know if it's this one. My guess is, because it probably was this one in Illinois, because I think this is the only one that's been around for a very long time still. Most of the other ones are kind of long gone and dead. So you missed welcome back to the show, Will Wilkins. I appreciate you coming back.
Sorry, it takes a while for the bits to get all the way up there from Mexico. They got to clear customs. There's a wall going up, I'm told. Yeah. There's a lot of things interfering with our connectivity.
So I was talking about, do you remember this little pouch here? You'd pay $5 or $10 and they'd come back and you'd be walking around like a badass because you had this, pocket full of tokens. It happened to be like, it wasn't like every time. I didn't have $5 to put in tokens, but when it did happen, I remember having this little sack here, and I was mentioning that.
Did you? Oh, did you?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I will tell you that I never had one of those. Like I never. Well, let me refrain or clarify. We had. So the only time that I would get the pouch that those coins came in, when there were kids in there that had so much money that it wasn't a thing to them.
Right.
Right. For me, it was special. And then I would pick it up off the floor and then continue my, what is the equivalent of a child beggar pushing the 25-cent slot and hoping a coin would come out so that I could maybe play one game of Star Wars Arcade.
Or check the coin return slot to see if maybe someone had, put one in there and didn't realize that it had been sitting in there the entire time. So, yeah. Great stuff. If you can find arcades, and we talked about this early on when we were doing the basement, and just the whole experience of an arcade is very different today than it was, and we'll never probably go back there again. Never be there. I have a goal to do that. I really would. If I win the lottery, I think I want to open up an arcade and make it like the Great American Hot Dog, which I've talked about in the show, or make it like Aladdin's Castle or something like that. Like I want the dark, gloomy. I want to even add like smoke, but like a smoke machine, like something I don't want real smoke, but just the atmosphere of the lighting and the smoke. And it'd be really cool to kind of recreate that. And I think people would dig that, probably all over the age of 30, but whatever, there's an audience for it. All right, we'll talk about Battlezone. Battlezone came out in 1980. It was designed by Ed Rotberg, Owen Rubin, and Roger Hector. It was released by Atari. You've got the marquee here that you can see for Battlezone. And it's one of the first vector-based graphic games that gave you this kind of first-person perspective. So you can kind of see it here. I know these pictures probably don't do it justice. It's really great. I love vector graphics games. Like, I think it's really crisp. It's very different than the sprite-based games that we all know and love, and there's plenty of these, but it was just more costly to produce and had some limitations that sprites could do a lot better, and that's why they eventually overtook the vector graphics games. But this was the title screen here, and then the reference in the novel, you can kind of see it here. I wanted to get a little jiffy. I couldn't find one, but this is the volcano that Klein mentions, right? So no matter where you were, that perspective never changed in the game. You could always see the mountains in the background, and you could turn around 360, but at some point you'd always come back, and this volcano would be there, and that volcano would be kind of erupting the entire time. You'd see these basically little pixels that'd be flying out of it, and that was supposed to be the lava coming out of it. It's really interesting that there's a whole thing that one of the guys, and I forget who it was, I don't remember if it was Ed Rotberg or Owen Rubin. It was one of the two, or maybe it was even the other guy. But they went into this long thing about one of the guys. They went into this long detail about how a lot of detail about how they programmed that volcano, and it became one of the more iconic things, and that's why it's mentioned in the novel. If you think about games back in 1980, right, seeing something like that was kind of cool. And again, this was really early on with some of those vector games, and there's I'll kind of segue into something else here. So there's the original artwork, which I always loved. I just threw it up there because I liked it. In the middle there, this was so the game came out in two forms. You had the two joysticks with just a normal screen. That's the one I always saw. I don't remember ever seeing this. I mean, I know we saw it at Galloping Ghost, but I had never seen one in person. But this is the VR one, right? You would put your face in this thing up here, and you'd be looking in there, and you'd be moving the sticks around. A lot of people claim that this is now the first official VR game that had ever been created because it had that visor on there. And this game was so hugely popular, and I won't use the word realistic, but it was popular enough that the Army approached Atari and said, hey, is there any chance that you could make one of these games, because we've got Bradley tanks that we want to train our Army men to use. And so they did. So they went out and created this thing for the U.S. Army called Bradley Trainer. And it was supposed to allow them to train and operate these Bradley tanks. They had helicopters that came in. There's some other stuff that they added as well. But probably outside of that, which is really cool, I guess the other thing that's probably more interesting and really cool is the yoke. If you look down here, this eventually, the technology, so they had to build this. It wasn't part of the original game design. They had to build that, and they would take this, and they wanted to use it for something else. Well, they threw this in the Star Wars arcade game. So if you think about Star Wars, the arcade game, and that was vector-based graphics, it's the exact same yoke. They just redid it and used that same technology, the money they invested in that, to put it into Star Wars Arcade, which came out in 1983. This is a really fun game. Like, it's immersive. Like, it really does feel, I mean, as immersive as you can get with, one color and a limited number of lines and polygons, and that really weren't polygons. They were just drawn lines that were meant to look like polygons. But if you ever get a chance and play the game, it's actually pretty fun. I think they did a really great job with this game. I don't know. What about you? Where does Battlezone sit with you? And did they ever do anything like on the NES? Did they ever release anything?
No. So it did get an Amiga treatment, but none of them really did any justice. So, obviously it was released on all the Atari platforms, 26, 5200, 70, whatever, 100.
78.
Like, yeah, 7800. But none of them really did it justice because they couldn't replicate the controls. And I think that's really what made this game. I do remember this arcade game. And I also remember this being the first arcade game that scared me. Like, if first of all, you had to use the little step stool to get up there because I wasn't tall enough to actually get to the visor part of it. And then once I had my face in it, we really hadn't seen anything like that. You'd never seen this immersive reality before. So things shooting at you, I remember this game being scary to me. Like, I just would not play it as a child. Like, that's an adult game.
Right. Anytime I gotta put something. Oh, never mind. Never mind. Yeah, it was an adult game for sure. Let's talk about this next game here. We're gonna talk about Tennis for Two. The reference: the museum's bottom level, located at the planet core, was a spherical room containing a shrine to the very first video game, Tennis for Two, invented by William Higginbotham in 1958. So here's I've got a picture up, modern version of it. So this sits in a museum somewhere, one of the video game museums. I think it says right there, Museum of Electronic Games and Art, and I don't know where that's at. But they went ahead and recreated it just because it looks cleaner and nicer. This is not. I've got a picture of what the actual one looks like. It's pretty close. Don't get me wrong. But looks like it's brand new and pristine, and that's not even the same oscillator. Not oscillator, whatever that thing's called in the background.
Oscilloscope.
Thank you. It's not even the same model as the one that was used originally. But this is essentially what it looked like. You had basically a board there. You've got two paddle controllers, what we would call them, basically little boxes with knobs on them. And in the background there is your screen. I've got a picture here we'll show you as well. But this Tennis for Two, so it came out on the Donner Model 30 analog computer, which would be the circuit board here. And the oscilloscope, it was a Type 304A, which was used for the display. And pretty simple thing. You would just have these two little, we'll talk about the game here. But this is the original one. You can kind of see it in the background. It's blown up here on the right-hand side. You can see the paddles there. There's the oscilloscope right there at the top. And what this looked like is this, and you can kind of see it there. So you would think about it as Pong, but only from the side view, right? This was kind of like, you could see tennis. You could see this was in the middle here, this little line that was supposed to be like the net itself. But you would go back and forth and just bounce this ball backwards and forwards. Really basic kind of concept. This was never really a true video game, right? I mean, it was just kind of a project and let's see what we can kind of do kind of thing. But it did open the gate for a lot more to come, which we'll talk about when we get to Space War here. But I've never played this game. I don't even know how I would play this game.
You could not play this game. You can't.
You have
an oscilloscope playing?
At the museum, though, they have it, and it's out there, and it works. You can use it when it works. You can do that. But no, I'd never played this, obviously. And I assume you didn't.
Oh, I have definitely not played this game. Yeah. But this really wasn't, to your point, it's not a video game. It's an experiment where you look at the behavior of an oscilloscope and then back your way into a game. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I think it's hard for people to recognize just how far back this is. This is 1950. This is a half century before Pong is released. I mean, that is incredible that, it wasn't even called a video game because that word didn't exist yet.
Yeah, exactly. 1958 is when this came out. So quite a long time ago. All right. Well, let's talk
about out. You have to air quote that came out. Like it was released.
Right. They did a big release.
The public can see it. The one that they had.
Yeah. Now here's another one. And this one's got a very interesting story as well. So this is Space War. You've got a picture here. I've got another little video or a little clip that I can show you here in just 1 second. So this is Space War that was developed on the PDP-1, which is a analog computer, back in 1962. So this is 4 years later after Tennis for Two came out. And the reference says, next, it was a replica of an ancient PDP-1 computer running a copy of Space War, the second video game ever made, created by a bunch of students at MIT in 1962. So the game was designed by Steve Russell, along with the help of a gentleman by the name of Martin Gates and Wayne Wittinen, I think is his name. They were working at Harvard at the time. They had just gotten a hold of this computer, this PD-1 computer, and they decided that they wanted this PDP-1 computer would allow you to create these shapes, right? Like these kaleidoscopes and like 2D shapes and stuff. And they thought, well, can it do more? Can we trick it so that it makes it look like these shapes are actually moving, right? So it was, again, another experiment. And can we do this? Can we make something look animated? It turned into them making this game called Space War, where you would control these two ships. You had one that was called a needle. It looked just like a little sliver. And then you had one that was called a wedge, kind of looked like a triangle. And the idea was you had to travel through space, which you can kind of see right here. Those little dots were stars. So you had to avoid the dots. And the object was to fire and shoot the other ship and blow it up. And that was really it. It was pretty simple. This whole thing, let me see if I can show you. This is, I'll show you the clip here in 1 second. But this is the computer here. So this is the PDP-1. This was developed by that company I mentioned, DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation, in 1959. This is the same corporation that Mitnick ended up hacking at one point. But this is the computer that ran the game, and it's huge. I mean, you look at it, it's like an entire tower back there, which is kind of crazy. Here's a close-up of the front panel, and it's all analog, so you're hitting switches and doing all kinds of stuff, and I'm not even pretend how that thing works, because I have no clue whatsoever. The problem with this game, there's no problem with it. I guess here's what it looks like. So you can kind of see there's the needle, here's the wedge, and they're going at each other and firing missiles and trying to blow each other up. This is really cool looking stuff. Like, I really like it. The problem with this is the PDP-1 computer, when it was released in 1959, or I guess let's say in 1961, the cost of this thing was about $120,000. By today's standards, that would have come out to over $1 million. So this wasn't a computer that anybody could just go out and buy. And that's why when this game came out, it was hugely popular, but it was hugely popular at all of these Ivy League schools like MIT and Harvard University, right? Because they had grant money and people were donating things, they were buying them. But this was not something that just existed everywhere that anyone could buy. So it was a small group of folks that did it. And when word got out that this game was out there, I mean, there were kids, there's stories of, students in line waiting, hours to play this game because everybody wanted to see it. And this is really what kicked off a lot more so probably than Tennis for Two. I would say this is really what kind of kicked us off into this whole concept of a video game, because you're actually doing something now, right? You're controlling these sprites and you are shooting people and all that. And this is I guess the first origins of a video game.
So I think that you're right. This is largely considered the first video game because, like we talked about, Tennis for Two isn't a video game. It wasn't produced. It couldn't be replicated. It wasn't technically using circuitry beyond the oscilloscope in order to create its graphics. This was being driven by the PDP, and it was mass produced and actually led to the uptick in sales for PDP-1s. So nerds at the time, including Wozniak, who we talked about earlier, he said, he said in one of his famous TED Talks, he's talking about when he was growing up, he had pictures of all these computers, and this is one of the ones that he mentions, all over his walls. And he would tell his dad, when I grow up, I'm going to own a computer. And his dad's like, are you kidding me? He was like, these computers cost more than a house. And he was like, that's okay. I'm going to live in an apartment.
Showed him. SHO NUFF.
Yep. Show.
But so I don't know. Anything else you got on Space War?
Nope.
Hope that's another Coke. Okay. I thought that you were getting to the cerveza.
Oh, no. I'd have to call room service.
All right. Let's talk about this guy. You may not recognize him on the left-hand side. I will tell you who that is. That is Bryan Adams. And,
what in the heck?
Yeah.
I thought that was a guy that hung out at Fred's Fish Fry over
on Marbach Road.
Yeah, when we were in high school.
Nope. It does look like him, though. But no, this is Bryan Adams, the Canadian Bryan Adams. As I walked into the game room, I heard a Bryan Adams song blasting out of the speakers mounted on the carpeted walls. Bryan was singing out how everywhere he went, the kids wanted to rock. Oh, I went to include that song on here because I do love that song. Everywhere the kids want to rock. Anyways, but I don't have it on here, so sorry. Maybe another day. So this is Bryan Adams. This is him back, I think it's around circa 1974, 75. He was only about 15 years old, and he joined a band called Sweeney Todd. This Sweeney Todd band is actually really good. It's like old school classic rock, very clean, not a lot. I mean, just pure kind of rock and roll. They don't have a number of hits, but if you want to hear what they sound like, go listen to Roxy Roller. You can actually hear him singing. That's why I took a picture of it. This is probably one of the better songs on there. There's probably about 3 or 4 of them that are really good, but you can hear him. He's got a really great voice, even at age 15, age 16, when he was a part of this band. Now, he eventually left and went to go on and have his solo career. So by 1980, that was when he released his first album. I think on the left-hand side is probably what most people remember him as, or maybe the cover of the album for Reckless here on the right-hand side. But Reckless was his kind of big one in 1984. That was his breakout album, his first album, Run to You, Somebody, Heaven, Summer of 69, right? Those are all songs I think everyone knows. If you're a Bryan Adams fan, they came off that album. He ended up doing Waking Up the Neighbors in 1991, which was his biggest album ever, because on that album, he had a little song called Everything I Do For You, which was part of the Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves soundtrack, which did well for the movie, and the movie did well for the song. That song stayed on the Billboard charts for 16 weeks at number 1 the entire time. And the video itself, which had clips of the movie for Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves with Kevin Costner, that video had a lot of heavy play around that time when it came on. I mean, I remember it just like it never went away. It was always on, kind of like Def Leppard, Pour Some Sugar on Me. In fact, it was right after that. I mean, probably about 2 or 3 years right after that. So it was around that same time. But I guess, and I'll talk about Top Gun here in one second, but when you think of Bryan Adams, Like, what do you think of? Like, do you think of his music? Do you think of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves? I've got a
I
weird
don't.
reference for me.
I don't, but I know you do because I remember in high school,
Yeah.
you were dating someone who loved this film, so you saw it a bunch of times. This movie is, by the way, terrible. It's terrible. His acting's terrible. The English accent is wow. You know, it is not Tatanka. It is not a good trade.
This was our song. This was our song, like our little, high school song. Hey babe, our song's on. Yeah, this is
yes. Oh, I know. I know. I know. Every time we got in the Renault, if the CD player wasn't plugged in, we were listening to this ridiculous song, and it actually made me hate Bryan Adams, right? Because once again, in this relationship, I was H, right? Like, so now I'm getting in the car, and now this is like the only time we're hanging out, and I'm having to listen to Bryan Adams, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves soundtrack. Like, not even something good like Summer of '69 or anything.
Right. Yeah.
Like, it's gonna be this raspy voice, just syrupy ballad that I'm sure if I had heard it a couple of times, it would have been great. So, but because I've heard it so many times.
Wait, so before you start ripping my heart out even further, what when you think of Bryan Adams though, like is this what you think of, or is there something else that you think of?
I am literally just straight from my brain, free speaking what this song makes me think of. Bryan Adams makes me think of being in the car with you, and then you just being like, "Hey, give me a minute." And you're like, and you're taking it out. But I can still see you mouthing the words, dude, stop this, kill me, put on They Might Be Giants, like save us from this. Maybe Das Effects.
I don't know if we were listening to them at that point, but so as much as the stupidest thing, and I don't have a picture of it, when I think of Bryan Adams, outside of the fact that I think of Robin Hood, I think of Canada because he's Canadian, but for whatever reason, I have South Park, the movie, because there's a point in South Park, the movie, where they bring up Bryan Adams, and then there's a guy that's from the Canadian government. He says, the Canadian government has apologized for Bryan Adams on many occasions. I don't know why that line has stuck with me over the years, but I think it's the funniest thing that they're apologizing for Bryan Adams. But nonetheless, the right-hand side, I've got a picture of Top Gun. So originally they came to him and said, hey, we need a song. Look at JR saying that was a song that you would roller rink hand holding. Yep. Thanks, JR. Bring back all the memories now.
Not me. I'm still eating that hot dog sitting on the side, watching the couple skate.
But so when the movie was coming out, they wanted a track. He was pretty hot at the time. They approached him and said, hey, there's a movie coming out called Top Gun. It's going to have this, that. We've got all these other people signed. We need a song, a couple songs. Do you mind doing them? Well, he said no. He said no, that he did not agree with it, that he felt like the songs would glorify war, and he is an activist, and there's a whole background on that we're not going to get into because of time. But yeah, he said, no, I'm not doing that. Find somebody else to kind of ruin that album. So they found this gentleman here. That is Mr. Kenny Soundtrack Loggins. And so Kenny Loggins was then approached, and he ended up doing Danger Zone and all the other Top Gun sounds, the theme song and everything else. And from that point on, that really kicked his career off in a lot of different ways. Like he ended up he's known as a soundtrack guy because he did a crap ton of soundtracks from that point on. So yeah, one man's treasure is another man's trash, or trash is another man's treasure. How about that?
Wasn't there a war in Robin Hood? I mean, I don't even get it. Like he just doesn't. He opposes air warfare. Is that what it is? Yeah, arrows and swords is totally cool.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, I think it was something to do with that, probably. All right, so I'm going to blow your mind here on this one. And I asked you before we came on the show if you knew about this, and you said no, which is really good. So here is the next reference is Robotron allowed all of its best time players to enter an entire sentence of text beside their score instead of just their initials. And this machine's top dog had used this precious victory space to announce that, quote, Vice Principal Runberg is a total douchebag. So remember, in the novel, he goes and he sees this, and again, Robotron allows you to have this a longer number of characters than 3, and he sees this sentence on here. So when you read the hardback, that's what it says. When you read, when you listen to the audiobook, it says Vice Principal Runberg is a total douchebag. But if you pull out, I didn't bring it with me. Dang it, sorry, bad show prep. But if you pull out the paperback version of the novel, it actually says Vice Principal Rooney is a what's the quote? Sorry, Rooney eats it is what it says, right? Top right hand corner here. it says Rooney eats it. So they made this change when they went to the paperback that was not in the original hardback novel. It wasn't in the audio soundtrack. There are some versions of paperbacks that still say Vice Principal Runberg is a total douchebag. I can't prove that, but I just saw that some people saying that they had versions that said that. But if you go by the paperbacks that came out right around the movie and any paperback since then, in fact, I even think if there's a hardback version, it says as well. It now says Rooney eats it and not Vice Principal Runberg. So first off, I couldn't find where Vice Principal Runberg even exists. I didn't know if this, I thought, oh, it's probably an 80s movie or something. I looked for, I went to no end, honestly, to try to find this. I couldn't find it. But the more interesting story here is, why did they change it? Why did they change it from Vice Principal Runberg is the total douchebag to Rooney eats it when the soft paperback came out? And there's actually a real valid reason. So in my sleuth detectiveness, and I don't think I put the picture up here, and I've got the two here, I went through and pulled the Robotron operator's manual. And when you go down to the operator's manual, let me see. I'm going to try to, sorry, I do apologize, bad radio, but I'm going to try to pull up this because I meant to include it and I didn't. And it's just that cool. When you go into the operator's manual, there is a section, and there's one of the settings that allows you to change the number of characters that you have. And the characters, I've got Photoshop. Can you guys see that? Can you see my screen there, Will?
Yes, we can, sir.
Okay, all right. So this is the actual, this is the one I want to get here. So you can see right here. So this is in the owner's manual for Robotron, and I'll blow this up just a little bit. So when you go in here under letters for highest score name, 3 is the recommended. It actually says down further right here, the number of letters the highest score player enter in name can be varied from 3 to 20, but 3 is recommended. So I think what happened, and again, I cannot verify this, but I would imagine if you count the number of characters in Vice Principal Runberg is a douchebag, it's 45. So I think when Ernie Klein was writing this, he thought, oh, I'll just put something funny in there, and didn't realize that he ran up against technically you couldn't have it say Vice Principal Runberg is a total douchebag. And so he had to change that, and he changed it to Rooney eats it, which is only, I think, a total of 15 characters. So again, I don't know if that's true or not, but I would imagine someone called him out on that, and he felt like he needed to go back and adjust it. What do you think?
I'm gonna say it's a pop culture error. Right. So Runberg still exists in all of the digital print also. So if you have the Kindle edition, if you have the Google Books edition, I have both of those, and they're both Runberg still. I just think I think it was just a miss. That's really, there is no way that in a book that is so tailored around the 80s, where every reference appears to be manicured out of this space, that you would make a Vice Principal reference and it not be Rooney. Like, name another Vice Principal that plays a significant role in any, except maybe Breakfast Club or 3 O'Clock High. I can't think of one that has notable screen time or falls into this. Look, there's a billion references in this book, right? And there is not, name another place in this text where a proper noun exists that doesn't have a cross reference. Yep. The only other story could be that, hey, maybe this was a vice principal at a school.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Like, this was
it could just be that
one.
Because there's only 2 interconnects for just about every pop culture reference in Ready Player One. And it's either it's something that we could have consumed that he was interested in, or something that ties directly to his life, like the names of some of his friends, or where he grew up, or the names of streets where he's lived, those kind of things.
Yeah. I'm with you there. I think it was probably going to be somebody that he knew, and it would be kind of an inside joke thing. But I do think someone called him out and said, hey, that's too many characters. You can't get 45 in there. And so he had to come up with something, and thought, well, the more obvious choice would be something like Rooney eats it, which is only 15 characters, and that fits within the 22 character limit that Robotron allows in the arcade. Yeah,
okay, so add this to the questions. This definitely has to be a question we ask him. We can explain, at least with some semblance of logic, just about everything that we've seen in the book. Like, you do it to great effect, even on things I don't think are real references. But on this one, this is clearly a reference. And,
right.
Both of us are proper nerds, right? We have an inordinate amount of lightsabers between the two of us.
Yeah.
And we were unable, with all of our resources to find a way to connect that to the story. Nor, I mean, even Reddit doesn't have anything, and they've already solved everything from unsolved mysteries. Like in the first 5 days,
right.
that series was released on Netflix.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, no, I think we will. I think we'll have to add that to the list of questions. Maybe we'll lead off with that question. Who is Vice Principal Runberg? Just see where he goes. Okay. All right, let's talk about Pac-Man. The reference, I continued further into the dark electronic cave and walked up to a Pac-Man machine at the very back of the room, wedged between Galaga and a Dig Dug. Now, let me just say this before you jump into this, because I know you're going to take this one. Pac-Man we have covered on here, but I felt like it was just something we needed to talk about, and we didn't get into some of the other references in here, which were Pac-Man Fever, as well as the perfect game of Pac-Man. So take it away. Give us a recap on Pac-Man and its origins, please.
Right. So just about everybody that's listening to this podcast knows about Pac-Man, released in 1980, designed by Toru Iwata. Whoa, that was like you saying something.
Yeah.
Iwatai, right? Who had, interestingly, no experience designing video games when he came to Namco in 1977. So he had never designed a video game. And then 3 years later, he makes Pac-Man, right? And I got to love this guy. And the reason I love Toru is that he doesn't even mince words. He was trying to build a game that attracted women to arcades. God bless this man. If you see this man, you should follow him on every social media platform. This guy had his priorities correct.
Yeah.
Right. So originally this was going to be called a Pac-Man, derived from the slang term paku paku, which means to chomp. It's Japanese slang. But one of the prevailing myths is that Pac-Man was inspired by pizza. That is not the case. And he has said it several times. You could get it in 2 iterations at the time that it was released. To put this in perspective, at the time that Pac-Man was, reaching its height, they were making 400 of these a day.
Wow.
Right. And could not keep them in places.
Yeah.
Like, this is actually when video games became mainstream, because before this, all video games resided in arcades, and occasionally a pull hall might have 1 or 2.
Yep.
But at this point, you had people you could find these at grocery stores, hotels, convenience stores, and Pac-Man started all of that because it was making tons of money. So much money, in fact, in Japan, that it was, for the second time in Japanese history, they had to start reminting 100 yen pieces, because all of the 100 yen pieces were in Pac-Man arcades. But there's no sense in going to a lot of the trivia, because there's tons of it out there. But for me, what I found the most fascinating is, Pac-Man's considered one of the first games to incorporate advanced AI. And I was much older, and I'm talking probably in my 20s when I found this out. Like, I thought all of the ghosts just kind of chased you around. I thought it was all random, but they were all trying to get you. I didn't recognize that each ghost was individually programmed to do different things, right? So Blinky, the red ghost, he is always going to be a chaser. He is taking the most direct route to get to you. Whereas Pinky is always attempting to get in front of you, depending on which direction you're headed. He's not trying to chase you. He's trying to get in front of you. And Inky, the blue ghost, is always running a consistent pattern through the board, right? Depending on what region you're in. And each one of the 4 ghosts has a quadrant that they're responsible for, especially when they go into scared mode. And then Clyde just randomly, idiotically moves around the board. So he is probably the most dangerous because he's the most unpredictable. Everybody else, like if you were an advanced game player, most advanced game players talk about the danger of Clyde more than the other ghosts, because the first 2 are predictable in their actions, where you really just don't know what Clyde's doing.
Yeah.
So they're actually inversely in order of difficulty on the screen. So if you're playing this game, Clyde's the one you worry about the most, then Inky, then Pinky, then Blinky.
Nice.
But with that, let's talk about this terrible song. And if you tell me you love this song, Albert, I promise you, I'm staying in Mexico.
Okay. Well, you might want to get comfy. But no, before we get to the song, hold on. Before we get to the song, I want to talk about the perfect game. So I think there's a total of, at least by Twin Galaxies record, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people now that have done the perfect game of 3,333,360. Billy Mitchell is still has he's I guess he has all the fame for being the first person to have done it back in 1999. He's not on this list because he's never been vetted by Twin Galaxies, and I don't know that he ever will at this point, since I think he's still in hot water with them. But yeah, so a total of 8 people now that have done it, and I believe it's Tim or Donald Hayes, I think, also has the speed record. And did I write that down? I thought I did. It was like 3 hours. Yeah. David Race has the fastest time of 3 hours, 28 minutes, and 49 seconds. So relative to what Wade did, he said it took him about 6 hours to do it. And I meant to go back and look to see, okay, where would he have fallen in the Twin Galaxies group? But that's pretty aggressive, 6 hours. I mean, yeah, there's a pretty big gap between 3 and 6, but all things considered, that's pretty aggressive. So even though he said in the novel he spent a lot of time doing it, still pretty impressive that he was able to do it as quickly as he did. So there you go.
Yeah, and so I was a fan of Billy Mitchell, right? So I think that every good story needs a heel, and for classic video games, Billy Mitchell, even in the 80s, was that guy. He was like, because video game guys, like us, we weren't the popular guys. It was our thing. And to have like a popular, like a quasi-popular guy, I know that he's about a nut job, but have success at video games almost was like, well, that's not fair. What do we have left? But
right.
You are correct. He was stripped of all of his records by Twin Galaxies, and he is officially banned from all current and future leaderboards on Twin Galaxies. So he will never have a record on here again.
Interesting. Yeah. Good stuff there from a story perspective. If you want to know more about him and everything that's happened. But let's talk about this. Pac-Man Fever by Buckner and Garcia. The song came out in 1982. It was released on the same album called Pac-Man Fever. There were other songs on there. There was a Donkey Kong. Yeah, there was a Donkey Kong, but they didn't do very well. Donkey Kong got to like number 106 on the charts. It did.
I can't even take this.
This song, though, made it all the way to number 9 on the top Billboard 100 back in 1982.
It was a simpler time. It was a simpler time.
There was, I think, as of 2008, I don't know why. I guess they don't track it anymore after 2008. It had sold 2.5 million copies, and man, this is a hit. Like Buckner and Garcia have a lot of hits, and this is just one of many. No, I'm kidding. They really don't have a lot of hits. It's like their only hit. I got a picture of them, and this is them. So they performed the song Pac-Man Fever on a few things. They did it a lot. Well, I don't know if they did it live. They say they did it live, but it's really hard to tell. But they did it on American Bandstand, I think. There was one other show, and then they did it on this show, which was, I had to include it, although you really can't tell except for the top right-hand corner, but this is Solid Gold. So this is them performing Pac-Man Fever in front of a live studio audience back in 1982 on Solid Gold, which was a TV show that had people dancing and music and stuff. It's hard to explain. There's no Solid Gold reference. We need to write that one down too. No Solid Gold reference and no Freddy Krueger reference. So I was thinking about this of stuff that was missed in Ready Player One. But yeah, no Solid Gold. But this is them performing it. I don't know who. You take your pick. You want to call the guy in the top left-hand corner Buckner? That's fine with me. He can be the guy in the bottom. So. Okay,
I think so. Yeah, the mustache makes him look like a Garcia, and I know a couple of Garcias. So I'm going to say that's.
I mean, this guy has go watch the video. He is so emotionless. He doesn't do anything.
Both of them. It's like the guy that we're calling Buckner. Like that dude looks like a skinny John Goodman pretending not to act. It is the worst thing. And what I found crazy about this is I watched this and it might have been the Solid Gold performance, but they do an extended mix. It's like 7 minutes and I watched every terrible second of it. Right. But the people in the audience, they're filming it from behind, and the people in the audience that are dancing. Yeah. And look, man, I'm going to have to move my arms up a little bit. They're doing this maneuver while they're dancing. I have never the Pac-Man in my life seen
come on
that. What is
that's what,
what
you
is
did?
That
people.
That's
this is
sock puppets.
It's the Pac. No, it's the Pac-Man. And you would
Pac-Man Fever.
Everybody was doing this. Will everyone across the nation was doing this? Just randomly bursting out into song and dance with the Pac-Man symbols.
That song does not sound like something that was supposed to be danced to. It's something you just listen to and then dispose of. You start. It is. Oh, it was a simpler time, Albert.
It was. So when this song came out, I was all of 8 years old, and yes, I did love this song. And Pac-Man was. I think I mentioned this when we talked about when we talked about Pac-Man originally. I mean, I was all in. I had the lunchbox. I remember I remember vividly having that lunchbox and ready for third grade. I think it was the time with that lunchbox in my hand. But the cereal was a thing. I was collecting there was a lot of stuff that was just starting to kind of come out in the early 80s with Pac-Man logos and stuff. Anything I could get my hands on, I was all over it. Really loved the cartoon when that finally made its way, I think around in 84, 83, 84, whenever that was as well. But yeah, I mean, this song was huge for me as a kid. I mean, I get it. It's really hokey and corny. And, I don't know if that people listen to it to these days, but it certainly has its place in pop culture. So if you get a chance, go watch the Solid Gold performance. Especially focus on this guy right here with the serial killer glasses and the Lego pieces mustache. Like, I don't know what kind of mustache it is. Like, I've never seen it. It's so bizarre.
Almost, it's quasi.
He's got a tie on. Sorry.
It's yeah. That guy definitely has a white panel van with no windows. Like, yes. Guaranteed. He's got a pocket full of candy and a trunk full of duct tape. That guy.
Come on over, kids. All right, here's Dokken. We'll try to get through this quickly. But Dokken was a band. Let's see. The reference was I was rocking like Dokken. So there you go. Not a real deep one there, but that's all you got. Dokken was a band from 1979 to 1989. Then they came back in 1993, and they're still around to this day. They started with Don Dokken. I don't know. Take your pick. I'm not sure which one. Oops, sorry, went too far. I'm not sure which one Don is. I'm going to assume it's this guy right here. He looks like he's well-fed. I don't know. Maybe it's not. But that's Don Dokken. John Levin, Chris McCarvin, and B.J. Zampa were the original members, and they've had a number of members in and out of the band since then over the course of, number 40 years almost at this point. But they didn't really reach commercial success until 1983 when they released this album here on the right-hand side. This was their Tooth and Nail album. Into the Fire is probably the song that people remember before, outside of the one that I'm going to show. That was probably their biggest hit at that point from that album. And the name, the band origin name, I mean, shocker, it's because the guy's last name is Dokken, much like Bon Jovi is, Bon Jovi. But it wasn't until, I guess, 1980. So they did Tooth and Nail in 1983, Into the Fire, Just Got Lucky, Alone Again. Those were all kind of hits that made its way over to the radio. In 1985, they released Under Lock and Key, that album, and that had In My Dreams, which is another one that people probably remember. In My Dreams, da, 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 da. That's probably one of the bigger ones. I'm sure you got it there.
It's been a while since I listened to some Dokken, but I'm quite certain that's not the rhythm. No, I listen to Dokken. I mean, there's at least 3 or 4 songs. I mean, you're about to talk about one that everyone from the 80s has heard.
So this is the one that everybody knows, and this is off the Dream Warriors, A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 Dream Warriors soundtrack. And they even label it here, theme from Nightmare on Elm Street 3. They did a whole video. You got Robert Englund there. You can go watch it. There's some behind-the-scenes stuff of the video being made, which is really cool. A lot of production shots they did for the video. But it was heavily promoted. The video did really well on MTV, as well as a little bit later with the Fresh Prince. But this is right kind of at the height of Freddy Krueger and Nightmare on Elm Street and all that. And this is like one of my favorite ones of all the Nightmare on Elm Streets. This is right up there in terms of one of the better ones that came out. It's really campy. The special effects didn't hold up really well, but it doesn't try to be anything than just a scary movie that has some really over the top moments in it. And they did those really well. But yeah, this is the song that's the most popular that they've done. Now, another quick thing is, and I don't know which one it is. Again, take your pick. You can pick whatever one you want. But Jeff Pilson, who plays bass, he did the voice of Johnny Cage on Mortal Kombat in 2011. So the Mortal Kombat game that came out in 2011, he did the voice for. How that connection even happened or how that phone call was ever made, I have no idea. I didn't have the time to dig into it, but he was noted as that being something that he did. So
you're scraping date. No, but I do. So I do like this. I do love Dream Warriors. It is the best of the films. And I think it's the best of the films because it was the first film that represented there were rules that even Freddy had to play by, which meant that you could win. And so I think a lot of people, like a lot of kids our age, were able to sleep better after that because it was the closest to a happy ending that we got in Nightmare on Elm Street.
Right.
So it.
And this is where, so JR, that's where I was going. I was gonna mention that this was really popular, and the other song that most people know about is A Nightmare on My Street by Fresh Prince. The funny thing was, I played the song for somebody much younger than me, and
Which song?
Nightmare on Elm Street or Nightmare on My Street by Fresh Prince. And I asked him, I said, "Do you know who this is?" And he's like, "No, I have no idea." I said, "Do you know somebody by the name of Will Smith?" He's like, "The rapper?" I was like, "Yeah, the rapper. This is him." Or no, he said the actor. Sorry, he said the actor. And I said, "Yeah, the actor." I said, "This is him." He's like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, he used to be a rapper and he had this song and that's it." He's like, "No way." Did not believe me. Would not take my word for that was actually Will Smith that was rapping to this particular song. And he's
wow, that's impressive. I thought most people knew him because like he was the bane of like a lot of artists coming up, including like Dre and Eminem. You know, Will Smith was the antithesis of that type of rap music. So he was constantly being made fun. And to this day, he's still made fun of as, you know, the most vanilla rap you can get. Yeah. Now, if you've heard this song recently, A Nightmare on My Street, I got a question for you. How many songs by DJ Jazzy Jeff start with, "Now I have a story that I'd like to tell"? Because that's how that song starts, along with half the songs he released in the 1980s.
Yeah,
like just about half his albums are songs start exactly that way.
There was
not real original.
There's I don't remember the full story, but I know they did not have the permission to do that song. They didn't get it cleared. They made the rap album. They got some under the table, "Hey, you know, we're good. Don't worry about it," to go film the video. And when the album came out, they got sued because they didn't get permission to use the character of Freddy Krueger or Nightmare on Elm Street or any of that stuff. And it went to courts. And I think they ended up settling out of court. And there was, I don't know what the exchanges or what the terms were, but yeah, they got into a lot of hot water by putting that song out. And it was huge. Like they couldn't stop it because the song was so big that they had to settle out of court because it was going to be bad publicity for the movie company for not allowing the song to kind of continue as it was.
Interesting. This still gets radio play every Halloween. You can expect that this is going to be on the radio in the next 20 days.
Yep. Full show. Show enough. All right. I'm going to make Zork quick. And I hate to do that, but we're getting really over on time. So this is, and I got to stop talking about the time because I said way too much. So let's, I think we're at chapter 23. Is that right?
We've made it. All right. You got 2 minutes to get it done. Busted.
It's not going to happen in 2 minutes. All right. Let me give you the narrative for 23 and we'll get in. And there's not many pop culture references. I think we only have 3 as a matter of fact. So the narrative for 23, it says, I wrote it, whatever. As Parzival arrives on the surface of Frobaz using a ring of teleportation, he notices that the Sixers were not around, which is kind of weird that they wouldn't be there. He was expecting to have Sixers all over the place at this point, but they weren't. So he surmises that IOI will soon be there, and he makes his way into the White House of Zork. And while he's in there, he heads into the kitchen, into the cupboards, and in there he sees that there's all these breakfast cereals in there, including the Captain Crunch cereal that we know has the key or the whistle. So he takes the whistle out, he blows into the whistle, and nothing happens, and he realizes that he needs to go collect the trophies. And what he means by that is in the game of Zork, you've got to collect all these trophies. So he goes on down and underground, plays the full game of Zork, and he even says he has to pull out like his notes or whatever to remember how to clear this thing. Eventually gathers all 19 trophies or however many there were, brings them back up into there, puts them into the trophy case, and it's at that point that he blows the whistle again. And the whistle then turns into the Jade Key, which is wrapped around with foil, which becomes important a little bit later, trying to get into the next gate. So this immediately shoots him back up into second place after he's done this. And he gets his next clue, which says, continue your quest by taking the test. And that one will hit, I think, in the next episode, actually. We'll be covering that. So just then, IOI finally shows up, and he narrowly manages to escape off the planet. His ship takes some damage. He's got to go get it fixed a little bit later. And he's finally back on Falco when Parzival sees that the news feeds are going crazy because now the Gunters and IOI are all in contested territory again over on Zork. They're battling back and forth, and they're all obviously in search of the Jade Key. So the chapter ends with Sorrento, though, acquiring the Jade Key. He finally sees Sorrento's name jump up there, so he knows that he's picked it up. And but the more important thing is he notices that Shoto's name disappears completely off the scoreboard. And we'll come to find out exactly why that happens, obviously, for anybody that's read the novel at this point. But that's kind of how it ends. It ends right there. So let's get into Zork. And I'm not showing it, so let me pull it up here. That's me again. Hi. Here's Zork. Zork 1. So Zork was one of the earliest and most famous text adventure games. So this is a text-based adventure game. We've talked a lot about these already. I know when we were talking about the TRS-80, we mentioned it there when we had Neil on. This was one of the first ones that I remember playing. Like this and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy were probably my first two that I'd ever played. But it's pretty straightforward. You go down into the world. You got to collect these trophies. The very beginning of this game, I think, is pretty iconic. It says, west of house, you are standing in an open field west of a white house with a boarded front door. There's a small mailbox here. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that and read that. And I don't remember if it was mentioned in the novel. I don't think it was, but that's what the very first thing it says on your screen. I don't know if I've got a picture. I don't. Excuse me. But it's pretty straightforward. You have different commands. And again, we've talked about text-based games and what how you play them. So we won't get into all that. The other reference that's kind of buried in here is the Frobaz reference, which is a province in Zork itself. And Zork eventually goes on to have all kinds of sequels, and it's its own world, really. I mean, there's different provinces, different people. The name Frobaz actually means something as well. So you'll see here on the right-hand side, it says The Great Underground Empire, A History. So this is the manual that came with it for some of the versions. And it says by Frobaz Mumbar, which is a character within the series as well. On the left-hand side, this is the picture that I assume that H sent him when in the last chapter, right before it ended, he sent him a picture that had the picture of Zork for the TRS-80. This is the cover of the instruction manual. So this is what he would have seen come across as a clue for him. And you can kind of see the White House there. He's got the trophies. He's got the sword. It's everything the game is as well. So I don't know. Did you ever play any of the Zork games? And there are other ones. I mean, there's Zork 1, 2, 3, Beyond Zork, Zork Nemesis. I mean, it goes on and on. There's tons of these things that are out there now. But did you ever play any of these games?
I didn't, but what I did do, so technically I've never played the text adventure on computer, but most people don't know that Zork was the very first choose your own adventure book. So Tor actually turned Zork into a choose your own adventure book that followed the exact same premise and did a series of them, but that eventually evolved to become choose your own adventure. And I had, and to this day, have over 100 choose your own adventure books.
Really?
Of the original. Yeah, I love them.
I have to get that. I didn't know you had that many of them, honestly. I don't think I did read those as well. I loved them as a kid. There's a board game. Have you seen this board game that's out now?
No.
For Choose Your Own Adventure. It's a full-fledged board game. It comes in a box about, if you can see my hands, where's my camera? It's about that wide. It looks like probably the same size as a legal pad, maybe a little bit shorter. And it's pretty thick. It's about this thick here. And the cover looks like a Choose Your Own Adventure book, but it's an actual game that you play, and it's a lot of fun to play. So if you don't have it, go pick it up. But not only did I do those, but I also did the TSR ones. So TSR had their own version of Choose Your Own Adventure books that they released, and they released a couple of different series. They did one with Dungeons and Dragons. They did one with Star Frontiers. They did another one with Top Secret, which was their espionage RPG, tabletop RPG at the time. I think there's even like a Gamma World book, if I'm not mistaken, that they did. And Alex, my brother, he's a huge fan of those books. I mean, he's a huge fan of Choose Your Own Adventure, but I think what TSR did was pretty cool in doing the same thing, just setting it into their universes. Did you find the game by chance?
I did not.
Oh,
I did not. In fact, I was actually thinking about the. Did you play the Netflix game from Dark Mirror?
Oh, I heard about it. No, I didn't play it though. They were advertising it everywhere.
Yeah, and so when I watched that film, and it was great. It was a great interactive experience for the kids and us to like make all these choices and see all the different endings and start over. It actually, even though you're watching it in freaking 4K and it looks freaking phenomenal and it's far more advanced, I felt the same way watching that I did the first time I played text-based adventure games on computers and read Choose Your Own Adventure books.
Wow, that's cool. Is it still out there?
I think it is. Yeah.
Okay, I'll look it up. It's probably worth it. This is the other reference here that they make about Colossal Cave. It says the first text adventure game I'd ever played was called Colossal Cave, and initially the text-only interface had seemed incredibly simple and crude to me. And it really is. I mean, I've got a picture of the screen here. It's not as elaborate as Zork or Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or any of the other ones that we mentioned on the show. This is one of the very, very first ones. And on the right-hand side, there's a board game that was created that was based on this as well. But this game was created by Will Crowther in 1975. It ran on a DEC PDP-10. So again, there's that same, we're talking about DEC, the company. This is now the third time that this has come up, but that you could get it on that. And it was very, very simple. This was like one of the very first ones that ever came out. And you would go into a large cave, and the idea was you would collect this treasure, and every time you brought the treasure back, you got, so similar to Zork, you would collect the treasure and you get points, and the maximum points you could get was like 350 points. And you had very basic rudimentary commands that you would enter. It was inspired by Dungeons and Dragons. He was an avid D&D player, Will Crowther at the time. And there was one command called XYZZY, which is mentioned in the Ready Player One novel. That was the secret word that you would use in the Colossal Cave. It would allow you to teleport to another place in the game. And just quickly, the little trivia there, he called it XYZZY because he was working for Xerox at the time and wanted something that started with an X because he was a company man, I guess. I've never played this, honestly. The board game looks way more interesting. It's not that it's a bad game. I'm sure it's fun, but it is, since it's one of the very first that came out, you're very limited into what you could do, and it, not a lot of replayability there. So yeah, I guess you didn't play this one either, huh?
No.
Okay.
I've never heard of that game.
That's fair. It's really obscure. I mean, think about it. It came on the PDP-10. Like, who had that system, right? I mean, I didn't.
No.
Okay, we're going to talk about The Fly, and then we'll get into breakfast cereal and SHO NUFF here in just SHO NUFF. But quickly, The Fly, 19, let me give you the reference. I engaged the Vonnegut's autopilot and activated my ring of teleportation by speaking the command word Brundle. With the ring, when the ring began to glow, I said the name of the planet where I wished to teleport. But before you get into this, did you come across the spelling's different?
Yes.
Is that a big deal to you?
It's not. And if you really wanted to do a deep cut here, the command word would have been dad, which was the password that Brundle used in The Fly. Right? The Fly 2? Maybe. Excellent. Yes.
All right, well, tell us about The Fly. 1986.
Released in 1986, directed by David Cronenberg, who made a ton of great movies in the 80s. They were all kind of B films, but Scanners, Videodrome, The Dead Zone. And it's based on a short story by George Langelaan, which was written in 1957 and originally published in Playboy magazine, which is the only real reason to get Playboy. It's just for the great science fiction.
Right, exactly.
So the synopsis is basically, prior to being hired by John Hammond to evaluate Jurassic Park, Jeff Goldblum finds out all about chaos theory as he transforms into a man-fly hybrid. Life will indeed find a way. So that's an important distinction between this and the previous iterations from the 1950s that were made of The Fly, is that in those, he was becoming a fly. And in the short story, it is similar to that. He is becoming a fly. Where what David Cronenberg was really trying to do was create a hybrid, because that's what happens, right? So no spoilers here, right?
All right.
At one point, Brundle basically puts himself in a pod. He's trying to teleport. He's drunk. He's a bad drunk in this movie. And it teleports to another pod, not knowing that there is a fly there in the pod with him. And they merge the genes because the computer doesn't know what to do with that extra genetic code. And he slowly starts turning into this hybrid. So David Cronenberg was really trying to make a story that talked about disease and aging and what it felt like to be helpless in that, and then what you would do. But because of the timing, this really took on a life of its own in terms of interpretation, to meaning, to have a broader meaning about the AIDS epidemic and what that looked like, because there's several scenes where he starts increasing where he gets lesions on his face, and we have a few of those here.
Yeah.
This movie has no shortage of disgusting scenes.
Oh, so it's full of it. Chock full of it.
Yeah. So the creature animation for this was great. Actually won the Academy Award this year. In fact, so good was the effects for this film that they allowed the guy who did the makeup for this film direct the sequel to The Fly, even though he had no experience directing a film. They're like,
yeah, I can do it.
Yeah, you won an Oscar. Get up there and make the next one. Take this other dude. All right. So Albert, having seen this movie, what is the grossest scene?
Number 4.
Number 4. Is that the grossest scene?
I don't know. There's a lot of them, but when she comes over and he's like, and then eats it, I mean, that's just, it sticks with you. Like even all these years later, it's unforgettable at that point.
Like her ex-boyfriend, the guy who's the publisher of the magazine or the editor or whatever, who like snags her story that
he throws up on, or
the one he's yakking on, right? Like yaks on his foot and his and they actually deleted a scene where he's straight munching that hand, and then test audiences were like, okay, that's too much, right? So there's actually, if you can believe this, 2 scenes that were cut from the film that weren't available until later in the DVD. So if you haven't seen it recently and you saw it during the original theatrical release or on VHS, you didn't get to see either one of these scenes. One is him eating the hand, which I don't even think made the DVD cut, and the other, you may recall that there's a baboon that he's teleporting, and that baboon ends up becoming exploding. Inside out.
Yeah, whatever.
No, he's literally inside out, right? As baboons typically as these things happen.
Yeah.
So later on, when he's drinking, he decides that he's going to try this experiment again. So he puts the baboon and a cat in there together, his little kitten, who makes an appearance in the film. And then it comes out as this baboon kitty hybrid, and then he beats it to death with a lead pipe, right? Because he creates this abomination. And test audiences were like, once that happened, we really didn't care about the character anymore. So they ended up like striking that out of the film and said, hey, look, man, we need these guys to at least be empathetic.
Right, yeah.
So where does this movie rank for you? I mean,
the first one. The second one I don't remember so much about. In fact, I didn't watch it as part of the homework. But definitely the first one had an impact on me, because I think by this time I was a teenage boy, 13 years old, and this was one of the first films that I saw that was kind of on the cusp of being like, should I be watching this? Right? I was very aware that this was stuff traditionally and typically I was not allowed to watch, but for whatever reason, through the guise of mom and dad drinking or not being around, I got to see it. So it was I really liked it, and I think some of the special effects later on, they don't probably hold up well these days because we can see it, and it's kind of clunky, the animatronics and stuff. But it's spooky though, especially like the way the story itself is kind of creepy, and and I think Gina Davis and him do a really good job. And he does a great job in everything he does. And I would say the same thing about Gina Davis. But I thought the acting's done really well. The special effects are over the top, but the makeup, like you said, is really great. I mean, and it's just that vomiting scene of him being a fly and wanting to be dead by the end of it, right? Be put out of his misery kind of thing. Sad.
This character in Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park are basically the exact same character.
That's true.
Right? They're logical guys. Both of them make comments about how they don't have time for dressing, right? So in this movie, the character that he plays only has like the same, like 3 suits that are exactly the same and the same pairs of shoes. And Ian Malcolm says something very similar in Jurassic Park about why he only wears black, so he doesn't have to do it.
Yeah.
But him and Gina Davis were dating during the filming of this movie. They actually made a few films together during the 80s, you may recall. Some excellent films such as Transylvania 65000 and Earth Girls Are Easy. So, yes. Both of which I would probably rather watch than the sequel to The Fly. Oh, I didn't tell you about one other deleted scene from this movie. So if you listen to the end credits, it has so first of all, something unique about the end credits is that the guy who did makeup by Chris Wallace is actually the first person they show in the credits. But it's a really somber ballad song about butterflies and that kind of thing. And that's because in the original ending to the movie, old girl's giving birth to the baby maggot, right? But in this time, it's a baby human with butterfly wings. And I guess somebody decided that's batshit crazy enough. We don't need to add any more. Let's just end it right after the.
We're done here.
Let's
see. I had no idea. Yeah, no, it's a great movie, and it's one I'd recommend for people that are high science fiction fans, because there's a lot of science that they're put into it. And I didn't really I never even took the angle of it being like AIDS and all that. I thought it was more about like more about it, kind of like Ian Malcolm said, just because you can doesn't mean you should type thing, right? And that's kind of what was happening here. I mean, it was an accident, but I don't know. All right, we got to move on. Yeah,
a ton of plot holes though in this movie, and I know we're late on time, but 2 plot holes. One is that there is all kinds of genetic code on you at any given time. So a lot of nerds point this out all the time. The biggest flaw with this movie being that if you were to put a human, the average human, inside a teleportation device, and those were the rules by which it was playing by, it wouldn't be able to distinguish that versus the millions of pieces of bacteria and viruses that you have in and on your body at any given time. So every time it teleported you, it would be a disaster.
Right.
Second is that they avoid the fact that this is still, even though, remember in the movie, the issue is that he can't teleport flesh. Mm-hmm. It does everything else great. Gina Davis's pantyhose. They've got, well, think about transportation as a $1 trillion business. If that's all your teleporter ever did was move inanimate objects from one place to another, anywhere in the world instantaneously,
you're set. You're done.
You're a billionaire. And then you can go perfect this science to do people later, right? It would obsolete so many industries. It doesn't make sense that he didn't just stop there and say, hey, I can do this. And the only logic they put to it in the movie is that he gets car sick and he doesn't like driving.
Fun. Yeah. Makes sense. Not really. Okay, we're going to talk about cereals, and we'll make this quick too, because I thought it'd be just kind of fun to talk about some of the cereals that were mentioned in this chapter. It says one of the entire cupboards was crammed with boxes of vintage breakfast cereals, most of which had been discontinued before I had been born. Fruit Loops, Honeycombs, Lucky Charms, Count Chocula, Quisp, never heard of it, Frosted Flakes, and hidden way in the back was a lone box of Captain Crunch. I've got a picture here of a lot of different 80s cereals, and I think I had all of these. It's just such a different time. Yeah, I mean, I remember, like, we would go, this was something we got, so we got WIC, right, and it would allow you to buy you could buy certain cereals automatically, but then you had basically a voucher you could use to buy other cereals if in the event those cereals were not there. So we took advantage of that all the time and got all of these cereals for a pretty nominal cost. And there's like Mr. T's. I didn't ever have there's the G.I. Joe's, and that was by Rastan. I keep doing that. There's the Pac-Man cereal I was talking about. I never knew there was an Indiana Jones. I never had that one. Don't remember.
I never heard of that.
There's a C-3PO's, Fruit Brute, which is a short limited run that they did as part of the Frankenberry and Count Chocula, all those. Cookie Crisp, Honeycombs, Freakies. I remember that one. Gremlins. We've got a channel in our Discord. We've got in Discord over at for Earglue Media. In the basement, in the basement section, we've got a channel that's dedicated just to cereal discussions, and that channel is constantly active. People going back and forth on what cereals suck and all that. And in fact, Mike came on earlier on. Where's his comment when he got here? What did he say? Where's the Fruity Pebbles box in the background, Albert? He's a big Fruity Pebbles fan. And I know that because, again, that channel is pretty active. All right, so here's the first one, Fruit Loops. This is the box from the 1980s. This is what I remember seeing it. And only 3 colors here. Now it's got they've got more colors in that as well. But quickly on this one, is this Fruit Loops? Thumbs up, thumbs down?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. All right. This one came out in 1963, released by Kellogg's. Released, I guess that's the right word. Released by Kellogg's, and their slogan was "Follow my nose, it always knows." I did some research. It does sound like toucans have a sense of smell, but they don't have an acute sense of smell. So take that for what it's worth. Here's Honeycombs. So Honeycombs was released in 1965 by Post. The logo was cut off there, but I just wanted to include this picture because it has a WWF. And here's one of the commercials that ran during the 80s with none other than who we spoke about last episode, Andre the Giant. Thumbs up, thumbs down on Post, Honeycombs. I wasn't a big fan of them.
So I'm going to be a thumbs up on most of these. I think really the only thing that was a distinguishing factor for me on all cereals was what toy was coming in it. That's all that really mattered.
Right, yeah.
Like if there are people listening to this that actually waited till they got to the point where they were out of cereal to get the toy out of the bottom of the box, you may be a sociopath. You've done this wrong because you rip the complete lid off so that it will never close again properly. Mm-hmm. And then you open the back and you dump its entire contents on the kitchen table. And then you sift through it like you're 1849er gold miner looking for that
boy.
Yeah. And that now that you've effectively touched every piece of cereal in the box, you just use your forearm to scoop it all back in.
Right off the plate with all the salt, pepper, anything else that's left on the remnants on the table back in there. That's almost as that's probably more egregious than just sticking your hand, although that is bad. sticking your unwashed hand down in there and just digging for the
and
toy.
just crushing the cereal.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you put it back in the box, it doesn't even need to be back in the bag. You could just put it right into the box. It's easier. It's easier to do.
Yep. The thing about that, and I think we mentioned this when we were talking about cereal too, is like eventually they moved the toys out of the bags for a lot of the reasons we're talking about. So when you go buy, they still do it. There was I was in the grocery store not that long ago, and there was a box of cereal that had some kind of a toy or trinket inside of it. But now these days, and it's probably been this way for the better part of 15, 20 years, when you open the box of cereal, that toy is sitting inside the box. So kind of wedged in between the bag and the box. So you didn't have to actually open up the bag. But I forgot to mention for Honeycomb, again, 1965, they never really had a mascot. They had the Honeycomb Kid at one point, and I guess maybe they had Andre the Giant there. This was Lucky Charms. So Lucky Charms came out in 1964 by General Mills. They did have a mascot, which was Lucky the Leprechaun. And this box has Star Wars character stickers inside. So this would have been around, probably 1980-ish, when this one maybe late 70s. But I included this picture because I remember this was a huge deal. Do you remember when the purple horseshoes came out? I do. Yeah. And there was the commercials. There was a big campaign that they had done. They were adding this new kind of temporarily adding this new marshmallow in there. And eventually now it's permanent. I think it's in every box these days. But this was a good cereal. Thumbs up on this one, yeah? Oh, yeah. Yeah. High thumbs up. All of these are really great. Boo Berries, Count Chocula, Frankenberry. Now, this I did not know as a kid why it was very inconsistent about when we would get it. Like, Boo Berry was extremely hard to find, and I really loved it. Count Chocula was always on the show. Like, it seemed like that was always there. And then Frankenberry was just kind of hit and miss. It just really depended on whether you got it. I will say that the masks that you see here, I had those. It was on the back of the box. I didn't find a back of the cover, but you had to cut them out and had little holes, and you put the string in it, and you'd wear the mask. So it would give you one of these different masks here to wear. All these cereals are really great. I will say, though, with the Frankenberry cereal, there was a point when there was something called Frankenberry Stool, because when this came out, they were using red number 3 and red number 2 as a dye to color it. And well, what they found out was your body can't break down red 2 and red 3. So what it was doing is making kids have pink poop. And on top of it, if you got it really bad, you were constipated. And so they called it the Frankenberry Stool. They eventually removed red 2 and red 3 per the FTC or FDA had them remove it back in like 1960 or was it 73? I don't know. It was like 1973, 72. They removed it, and so they went to a different dye. But yeah, that was a real thing at one point. They didn't understand why kids had pink poop and couldn't poop. Nasty. There you go. Here's Quisp. Now, this is the one that threw me for a loop because I have never freaking heard of Quisp, and that's not to say that I don't need to say, I'm not saying I know everything, but I don't remember even seeing this on the shelf. Like, I don't know if this is like a northern thing. Well, I was in Michigan. That was on. Well, it was made by Quaker. Yeah, there you go. It says a lot. They're all up north. They're all up north. All the Quakers are up north. Yeah. So Quisp and Quake were the two characters, and they had commercials out. There's a lot of alliteration there, but they had commercials out where they would have these two characters in the commercials, and they were kind of like the counterparts. You had Quisp, who was like this young, frail-looking thing, and then you had Quake, who was like this really powerful, bulky, meathead kind of character. So Quisp was the one on the left, obviously, and then for Earthquake Power, you would eat Quake, and the tagline for Quisp was Quisp for Quasi Energy. None of this rings a bell, huh? No. Yeah, no. Quaker Oats Company, and the character's name is Quisp. All right, I have no idea what this even tastes like. It's crunchy corn syrup. It looks like deflated Captain Crunch. Well, maybe. I'll tell you that. I think the reason why is because both of these cereals were released in 1965 and had reached the end of the run by 78. So, yeah, you were still eating soft foods. I was still on the teat. No, I don't know. That was much later. That was much later. All right, here's Frosted Flakes. So Frosted Flakes came out in 1952, much longer, a long time ago. Released by Kellogg's. Their mascot was Tony the Tiger, which I think we all know. Tagline was "They're great." Everybody knows what that one, right? The more interesting thing, though, was if you look on the left-hand side, that's the original box and the original name, Kellogg's Sugar Frosted Flakes of Corn. And back in 1983, I believe, that it ran from 1952 to 1983. They changed it in 1983. They took the word sugar off because this is right around the time people started getting more health conscious and realized that sugar really wasn't bad. And Kellogg's didn't want to include that, so they changed it, and that's what the box looked like right after that. So they removed the word sugar. But yeah, I always remember calling it Sugar Frosted Flakes. Like Sugar Crisp, Sugar Frosted Flakes. There's a number of cereals that even to this day still have the word sugar in them. It's probably not as bad now. But yeah, that's that one. And let's see. And then the last one that was mentioned was this guy. So Captain Crunch came out in 1963 by Quaker Oats Company. And their mascot was Captain Crunch. They went through a lot of different slogans. I think the one that probably stuck the longest was the one that you see there in the bottom left-hand corner, stays crunchy even in milk. I despise this cereal. I do not like Captain Crunch. I do not like it Sam I Am. It's terrible. It's equivalent, and this is the Discord conversation that always comes up. You might as well just break some glass and pour it into a bowl and eat it because it is the equivalent of eating Captain Crunch. I get it stays crunchy, but man, after a bowl of this, the roof of your mouth is completely shredded. You're in the ER, mom's crying, you're crying, horrible decisions being made. I never really was a big fan of Captain Crunch, but I don't remember. Where are you with this one? Like it?
Oh, I love it, but I'm an all berries guy.
That's right. You and Crowley are all berries guys. That's right.
I'm an all berry guy. So I like Captain Crunch, but not Captain Crunch by itself. It has to have some berries, right? So that's how I rate the Captain. But I've done the research. This will not stay crunchy over extended periods of time.
Okay. How many, what are we talking? 72 hours or longer?
No, commercial breaks. Like if it won't last this podcast. I know that.
Yeah. Not today's show anyways. Yeah, this is not my favorite, but I thought it'd be fun to include the box that actually had the Boson whistle, which you can see there on the back side there. But yeah, if you love Captain Crunch, there's something terribly wrong with you. All right, let's and then there's the whistle, and there's that crazy guy that we talked about. So we don't need to talk about it. All right, we're gonna wrap up here. Last Dragon, released in 1985. Take it away, Mr. Will.
Directed by Michael. Show Nuff, the Shogun of Harlem. Directed by Michael Schultz, who directed Coolie High, Car Wash in '76, and Crush Groove in '85. And he did videos for Fat Boys, Earth, Wind, and Fire, and Sheila E. in the '80s. Probably in the '80s. Show Nuff.
Sorry, no, I can't do it. Sorry.
So here's the synopsis. Shot in just 44 days, Leroy Green is a martial arts master who refuses to fight. He's a Bruce Lee fan who's so sure he's Oriental that he eats his popcorn with chopsticks. His friends think he's too serious. His family thinks he's crazy. His enemies think he's no challenge, but he knows he's the last dragon.
Show Nuff.
This is the first synopsis I didn't write. Like, I know you typically read the IMDb ones, and I usually write my own, but this is literally what it says on the movie poster. But we're really here to talk about the star of the show, which is Julius Carrick, right? Show Nuff. This is probably the most underrated villain in 1980s film. Maybe he's got to be.
Maybe ever.
Like there's only two things he's really known for. It's this and The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr. And he's basically playing Show Nuff Country Edition. Like, you can see it in that picture.
Just as angry.
Oh my God, this is a great film. And what I remember about this film the most is this guy's stealing every scene. He's got lines like "Kiss my Converse," and I got something to read. Yeah,
he kicks him in the face after he does. But yeah, go on. Sorry.
In fact, I think we're like in this next slide where we have all gifs of where he's like he's doing his thing. That part where he has like the red on his hands is like my favorite part, where he's like, "I got something real in these hands for your ass." Every line he says is incredibly quotable. Yeah, just great, man.
So as a kid, I would say this was one of my favorite movies because you think about, 1985, we're at the height at, karate and ninjas are just, really getting apexing. You take that, you mix it with breakdancing and soul music that's really becoming popular. There's comedy, I guess, in here. I don't know. Like this movie is really hard to like pigeonhole into one genre. It's a lot of different things. Sometimes it feels like it's a music video. Sometimes it feels like they're trying to sell music artists because a number of them. I mean, Barry Gordy, I think is it Barry Gordy who did this one?
Yeah, he was the producer of it.
Yeah, and so like he felt like Motown at some points. There's now I'm just gonna start rattling off some of my favorite moments, like the three Asian guys that are like they're terrible. Like they're so like stereotypical. Like it's offensive. Like it's almost uncomfortable to watch today, but it's so funny. And not only that, but their accents don't even seem real. I don't even know that they really had accents. I doubt they really did. So they're like ethnic people that are portraying stereotype accents, but then they take it even to another degree later on when they start trying to do like the black stereotype when they're talking to them. That hey, so brother, and they're doing all that. It's like so egregious. And this guy Timac, like the kid that plays him, I mean, he was only 19 years old. He'd never really acted in anything before. He has like no personality. He's completely countered by SHO NUFF because they're like total opposites throughout.
What's crazy is that Timac got that role, and there were two other actors up and coming in Hollywood. Both of them wanted to be in kung fu movies and like that style of movie making. Named Lawrence Fishburne and Wesley Snipes. I wonder if those two dudes ever went to do anything that was kung fu related in
Never
cinema.
heard of him. Never heard of him. Snipes,
but
is all
Mario, he's still doing his But I think Lawrence Fishburne stopped after The Matrix. But both big actors from the late 80s like Mario Van Peebles and Denzel Washington, who's still incredibly famous, both auditioned for the role.
Did they really?
Timac ended up getting, they did.
How did Denzel not get this?
I don't
know, because this guy, my man, he doesn't have he has no acting ability, and I don't mean to slight him, but he's not really good in this movie at all. Timac, this guy.
No, the last time I think that I even saw this dude was when he's a referee in UFC 2 back in the early 90s.
Okay.
And I think it's only because the only qualification I think you needed for UFC at the time was anything
a punch.
Are you the master?
Are you the master? SHO NUFF.
So that SHO NUFF thing is actually a real thing. It's a blues callback. So blues music, like if you were just sitting there and you were like telling somebody the blues and you were telling something that was real, everyone in the audience would shout back, SHO NUFF. Yeah. If you're like, hey, have you ever had a podcast go 2.5 hours and it's not over? SHO NUFF. Right. Those kind of things. That's where that came from.
Yeah. Yeah. I knew it was a thing, but they took this to a whole new level and made it its own thing and gave it a whole pop culture thing around it. This movie is a lot of fun to watch. Like I recommend it if you've never gone out and seen it. It's certainly really hokey. It doesn't try to be anything more than what it is, and it takes all these weird turns. Like you didn't even touch on like the storyline of it's not just these guys, but then you got the guy that's got the arcade, and his wife is or girlfriend or whatever it was is wanting a music video, so they were trying to collect on MTV and the height of MTV at the time, and she's in different outfits and then later on, it starts getting a little bit darker because he pulls out a gun. He's, that now his life's being threatened. You've got the typical Asian, little Asian Miyagi character in here as well, who's his trainer. And, there's a trope of, the power has always been inside of you. Right. And that's kind of like the theme here. And that's eventually when he reaches inside of himself and is able to have the glow, which is where the reference comes from here. I don't think I said I was having the best game of my life. This was it. I could feel it. Everything was finally falling into place. I had the glow. And so what he's referring to is what you see in the bottom right-hand corner in that little GIF there about him glowing, which they never explained. They just said that at some point he's going to have the glow and he earned his last dragon patch or whatever that ridiculous thing was at the very beginning, like the Cub Scout thing.
I don't know. After watching this movie, I genuinely believe that every fight was supposed to start with somebody doing that. Like you had to do, if you weren't doing this maneuver, you have no chance of winning this fight.
Yeah, exactly.
Like none. You have to
whatsoever. Do it. We got a lot of people here.
Yeah, so just a bunch of people that are in this. Yeah, Vanity, of course, is in there. Chaz Palminteri, who's in just about everything after after this movie. You know, there's just tons and tons
Usual
of people
Suspects
in
is what
this.
I remember.
Yeah, that's what most people. And then I forgot what this actor's name is. He's in like every Italian mafia movie that was made after that, Goodfellas and all of those. And then, you know, Macy
William
down
H.
here.
Macy. Yep.
Yeah, this was his first film. And then and then what's her name? Rudy Huxtable makes her acting debut in this movie as well.
Oh, I didn't realize that was
a bit
her.
part. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then of course we get to the
Ernie
main
Reyes
character
Jr.
of this. Ernie Reyes Jr. was who I wanted to be. I think I was about this age and I thought this was the coolest dude ever. Yep. And then he got to be in like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and a bunch of other films. And you're like, man, this guy's killing it.
Yep. Hits. Blockbuster after blockbuster.
So the worst part of this movie to me is the kid, the friend of Timax, that is breakdancing out of the ropes. I learned in the military that that's not a technique that works.
Right. They actually teach you that. Do not do this.
Do not break dance. Don't pop and lock out of the ropes.
There's a scene when then they're popping and locking in the theater, and like people are like getting mad, and it's just oh my goodness, it's a great.
It's
movie.
So ridiculous.
Yep.
Yeah, you should definitely watch this.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about like Rhythm of the Night. There's Vanity. You mentioned, or you have her there. She went on to date Prince. I remember. She had a
there was a Prince Michael Jackson thing. There's like a weird love triangle that goes on there, but we'll cover that some other time. Maybe the next book we'll talk about Vanity.
Let's hope so. We can only hope so. I think so. Yeah. If you have a chance, go watch it. I think overall $33 million is what it ended up earning, and they only spent 10. So did really good in the theater, and it is a cult classic by all standards today. So, all right. Any final thoughts on this one?
Nope. Go see it. Highly recommend.
Highly recommend it as well. Okay. I think that's it. We did it. And we're not too bad. I mean, we've gone longer with less or more, however you want to look at it. But yeah, we're going to get out of here. Before we go, I want to say thank you to our newest Patreon member, JR. Thanks for your contribution. I really appreciate you doing that. So I got some stickers for you, and I'll get those over to you. So hit me up on Patreon or wherever. You can do it even here. I don't care. Wherever you want to. Give me your address if you're comfortable doing so, and I'll send you some the basement stickers for you for signing up as a Patreon member. So thank you for doing that, sir. All right. I know it's late in Mexico. I know you get out of here, but do you got any final thoughts, any final words on SHO NUFF or this episode?
SHO NUFF, I do. But we're out of tape. Like this tape only goes to 2 hours. We've got it on slow play, but you still can't get beyond 3 hours on this tape.
Quality's terrible. All right, we've got chapters 24, 25, and 26 coming up, but I think the one I'm most excited about is Blade Runner, because that's a movie that I've seen that movie a billion times and really like it, but there's all kinds of other stuff. We're going to get into a lot of robots and some Kurosawa as well. We'll get to Willy Wonka. I know you're a big Willy Wonka fan, so I am. I'm going to guess you're going to want to take that one, and that would be okay with me. So, all right. Well, thanks everybody for sticking around, and hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back next week for 24, 25, and 26. We'll see you then. The views and opinions of the Basement hosts are of our own and are not in any way affiliated with Random House or Ernest Klein. All quotes, music, sounds, trademarked, and copyrighted material referenced in the show are owned by the respectful companies and creators and are used by the Basement as fair use for entertainment purposes only. It would take me a month to read this whole disclaimer, but sad to say, I don't have that kind of time.